Might take a second.
Abby, just let us know when we're ready to roll.
We're good. We're up now.
Good. Okay.
Might take a
So
second.
why don't we, should we wait for everyone to come in, or Abby, is everyone in from the waiting room?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? I know we have a very full agenda. Good evening, everyone. This is the first meeting of the Howard County Delegation for the 2022 legislative session. We're pleased that you're able to join us tonight, and certainly appreciate the presence of the members of the delegation here, as well as those who are coming to testify on various pieces of legislation before the delegation as well. So I know we have a very full agenda, so I'll turn it over to my co-chair for the House Chair, Delegate Watson, to go over some of the guidelines for the hearing.
Thank you, Senator Lamb. Good evening, everyone. I'm Delegate Courtney Watson, the chair of the House Chair of the State Delegation, and I'm going to briefly review the rules so you know what is happening tonight and in what order. The testimony will be heard in the following order: Howard County Bill 2, Bill 9, Bill 3, Bill 6, Bill 5, Bill 12, Bill 10, then 11, 13, 8, then the legislative bond initiatives, and Howard County 1 will be the last bill on the agenda. We may need to mix this up if necessary, but that is what we are intending to start with tonight. The chairs will state the name of the person up to testify, as well as who is on deck to testify next. Please state your full name for the record when it's your turn to testify. You will have 2 minutes for one bill or LBI, and 4 minutes for 2 bills or LBIs, and 5 minutes for 3 or more. You can testify on more than one bill at once. Please also state the number of bills and or LBIs you will be testifying on, so our timekeeper gives you the right amount of time. Our delegation administrator, Abby Rubling, will be keeping time. We would greatly appreciate it if you would please respect the time limit to ensure that everyone who has signed up to testify gets the opportunity to do so tonight in a timely manner. Once you've finished testifying, please sign off of the Zoom meeting. You can continue watching the hearing live on the Maryland General Assembly website or its YouTube channel. These links were sent to you in the email along with the Zoom link. I am going to read the roll call of legislators, and when I read your name, if you would please speak briefly on any of your legislation that is up for tonight. We're going to read all of the names of the legislators, and this will take less than 8 minutes if everyone speaks quickly. I'm going to start with Senator Lamb.
Sure, thank you, Chairman Watson. So I'm Clarence Lamb, the Senate Chair of the Howard County Delegation. I represent District 12, which includes West Columbia, parts of Elk Ridge, Ellicott City, as well as parts of Baltimore County. I serve on the Senate Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee, and I think we have just a brief few seconds to introduce legislation and mention ones that we're sponsoring. So I am the sponsor of Howard County 10-22. We've heard from a lot of folks who are longtime residents of Howard County, who are of limited income, and who are seniors who have lived in Howard County for a while as well. This is a bill that allows them to have tax credits for some of their property taxes if it's enabled by the local county council and county executive. And we may hear more about this bill later on from folks that are testifying. Back to you, Delegate Watson.
Thank you, Senator Gazzoni.
Hi, Senator Guy Gazzoni. I represent District 13, and I am the chairperson of the Senate Budget and Tax Committee. As far as bills, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think I have at least 1 or 2 LBIs out there, and one liquor bill. A liquor bill really deals with sort of expanding, sort of extending the some of the decisions that were made during the pandemic to allow for outdoor dining and alcohol, but this would be at the mall. So that's pretty much it.
And that would be Howard County Bill 13 that has to do with alcohol beverages at shopping malls, which is the Columbia Mall. Senator Katie Frey Hester.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in terms of legislation, I'm Senator Katie Hester. I represent District 9, which includes Ellicott City all the way out to Mount Airy, and also includes a portion of Carroll County. I sit on our Education, Health, and Environment Committee, and I'm also the co-chair of the Joint Committee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Biotechnology. In terms of legislation, tonight I'm bringing forward Hoco 2-22. This is the due process proceedings for children with disabilities, also called the burden of proof. And this has been discussed, at length in the county for cases where the parents of a student with a disability and the teacher and the school system disagree on the student's plan. For years, the parents have had to do the proving. So they've had to hire the lawyer and go to court. This shifts the burden of proof to the school system. So the school system has to prove that they did not meet the requirements in the plan. And I believe at this point, we actually have support from the school system, from the parents, and from the teachers union. So we'll be hearing from them tonight. I do have also a couple of LBIs, but we can talk about that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hester. Delegate Vanessa Atterbury.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. I am Delegate Vanessa Atterbury. I represent District 13. I was recently appointed chair of the Ways and Means Committee. Prior to that, I served as vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, and I chaired the House's Police Reform and Accountability Work Group. I have 3 bills that are being heard today. 622 related to the orphans court judges, and it's a constitutional amendment. And if voted on favorably by the people, what it would do is put Howard County in line with Hartford and Montgomery County and move the orphans court into the circuit court. The second bill is not new. If you were serving with us last year, Howard County 822, and that is a commercial excise tax bill that would it's enabling legislation that would enable the county to tax as they see fit for a certain period of time that they see fit, commercial real estate, and those revenues would go specifically for deferred maintenance and the priorities to be determined by the school board. And the final bill is Howard County 122, removal of SROs. This was put in the same posture as it was amended for delegation members, as it was amended by this delegation. It did not pass out of the delegation. And interestingly enough, as it was amended by this delegation is exactly how Montgomery County passed the legislation. So it would remove SROs from the high schools where they currently are. Right now in Howard County, African Americans and those with disabilities are disproportionately arrested by SROs. In addition to SROs, we have security assistants in our schools. And so there are a lot of folks here to testify opposed and in support of. I would ask the delegation members to also look at the lot of testimony that was submitted in support of for those that couldn't come tonight. And there are also some young people on the call that Madam Chair and Mr. Chair that might have to drop off since it's going last. So if those high school students have to drop off, I hope they would be able to submit their written testimony to the delegation.
Yes, thank you, Delegate Atterbury. Absolutely, anyone who wants to submit testimony to the delegation can do that in the next few days, and the delegation administrator will get it to us. Delegate Eric Ebersol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Eric Ebersol. I represent, along with Senator Lamb and also a couple delegates you're going to hear from in a minute, District 12. I'm pleased to tell you that I don't have any particular legislation that I've introduced, although I'm proud to say that my new chair and I will be working hard on a bill because we worked very hard on the SRO bill last year in delegation. And I'm sure I'm looking forward to working on it again this year.
Thank you, Delegate Jessica Feldmark.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Delegate Jessica Feldmark. I too represent District 12, and I serve on the Ways and Means Committee, where I serve on the Election Law Subcommittee and the Revenues Subcommittee. I have 2 items on the agenda tonight, both related to affordable housing. One is Hoco 522, which establishes a Housing Opportunities Trust Fund. This was a recommendation that came out of the Housing Opportunities Master Plan. And the other is an LBI for Patuxent Commons, which you may be familiar with. It's an innovative, inclusive, mixed income community, and eager to offer our support to that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Feldmark. Delegate Terry Hill.
Good evening. My name is Terry Hill, and I also represent District 12. I serve on the Health and Government Operations Committee, and I'm introducing two bills tonight. One, 1122, Hoco 1122, is a follow-up of the bill we passed last year that put a cap on the number of Class A or liquor store licenses per election district. This bill would serve to try and prevent those licenses from being concentrated in a small area. So to try to make sure that they're distributed and that one section of an election district doesn't become inundated with liquor stores Class A licenses. And the second bill is Hoco 1222. It's a follow-up of legislation that we passed in 2019 that enabled the county to put a fee on plastic bags. Upon the request of a member of the county council, this bill would allow them to consider exempting residents below a certain income or receiving certain government supplemental assistance from having to pay the 5-cent fee. So it's enabling legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Hill. Delegate Trent Kittleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Trent Kittleman, and I represent District 9A, which is Western Howard County and the southern part of Carroll County. And like Delegate Ebersole, I am not introducing any legislation this evening. However, I've been a longtime supporter of the bill that Senator Hester is introducing to switch the burden of proof. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Kittleman. Delegate Reed-Novotny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Reed-Novotny. I too represent District 9A, Western Howard County, Southern Carroll County. Looking forward to the discussions tonight. Thank you for everyone who's coming to testify. Thank you.
Thank you. And Delegate Shane Pendergrass.
Hi, I'm Delegate Shane Pendergrass from District 13, and I chair the Health and Government Operations Committee.
Thank you. Delegate Jen Terraza.
Hi, I'm Delegate Jen Terraza. I represent District 13, and I'm looking forward to supporting the SRO bill and the due process bill that Senator Hester has introduced.
Thank you, Delegate Terraza. I will conclude with, I'm Courtney Watson, and I serve on the Economic Matters Committee. I have one bill before the delegation, which is the alternate instruction policy for the Howard County Public School System. And what this bill does is it gives flexibility to the school system to provide alternate instruction in the case of emergencies, weather events, and that sort of thing. And you will hear more about that later tonight. And with that, I believe we've captured all of the delegates and senators. Is that correct? If I have missed anybody, please let me know. And in the meantime, we will start with Howard County Bill 2. And we have the Board of Education up first to testify. And following that, we have Andrew Stetner of the Howard County Autism Society, who is followed by Heather Kelso.
Good evening. It's my turn, Andrew Stetner from the Howard County Autism Society.
Mr. Stetner?
Yes. You ready for me?
I believe we have the Board of Education, Vicky Catrunio first, and then you are on deck.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Sorry about that. I couldn't hear.
That's okay. Is the Board of Education here?
Yes. Chris, you want me to start?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Christina Delmont Small, Howard County Board of Education. The Board of Education supports Hoco 2-22, shifting the burden of proof to schools introduced by Senator Hester. The board believes this shift would allow the school system to reinforce a culture of partnership with parents. This bill is about doing right by our special education students and families. The opposition you'll hear centers largely on unreliable forecasts of a dramatic rise in due process cases being brought against the school system. There's no data to support this claim. In fact, the Maryland Department of Legislative Services noted under HB 1489 from 2018, the last time this bill was introduced statewide, that after New Jersey's shift in 2008, there was an initial surge in the number of due process cases in the first year after enactment, but in the following 3 years, that number returned at or below levels prior to the change. They also noted a downward trend in cases following a shift in the law in New York in 2007. Many argue school systems will take on heavy financial legal fees and teachers and staff will be overly burdened. Without research to support the claim of increased cases, the opposition tied to these arguments falls short. Misguided opposition also results from the decision made in the Supreme Court case under Schaefer v. Wiest. That ruling addressed the fact that because federal law is silent on the placement of the burden of proof in special education due process cases, the decision falls to the default rule for court proceedings, which in Maryland is the party seeking relief. The court specifically declined to address whether state laws or regulations could override the default, meaning the issue remains open to a shift at the local level, which is what this bill will do. The Maryland Department of Legislative Services found 8 states with a statute or regulation placing the burden of proof on the public agency, and New Hampshire just passed a similar bill this past year. School systems hold the fundamental responsibility to provide a free and appropriate education under the Individuals with Disabilities Act. As such, staff already prepares for meetings with parents to support the individualized education plan developed by the school and has access to the data and expertise on a student's progress, the proof needed to show that appropriate services have been provided. Thank you.
Thank you. And who's up next from the Board of Ed?
Hi, I'm Antonia Watts from Howard County Board of Education, and I'm going to speak about Hoco 822, commercial building excise tax. The board has supported both previous iterations of this bill and again asked the delegation members to consider the importance of a financing option dedicated to the purpose of funding long-term facilities maintenance. The school system has reached approximately $500 million in deferred maintenance costs. Estimates fluctuate as facilities age and projects are pushed out, which is coupled with uncertainty around material costs. The availability of recent funds has been insufficient to address the backlog of projects, as it has allowed for the funding of only a few projects every year, with new deferred maintenance projects taking their place. A dedicated funding stream allowed for in this bill would be a key investment by our state and local funding authorities in order to maintain safe, healthy schools and balance the total cost of ownership of the facility. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more board member or 2 more board members?
We have one more board member.
Okay.
This is Jennifer Mallow, and I'm speaking in support of Hoco 922, Public Schools Alternative Instruction Model Policy. The Board of Education supports Hoco 922 by Delegate Watson. Long overdue in Maryland is the recognition that innovations in teaching reach far beyond traditional brick and mortar classrooms. In our ever-changing educational landscape, local school systems need the option to reimagine instructional time in a manner that does more than just check a box on students being in physical seats for 180 days. Instead, instructional time could be more effectively measured based on the days or hours that students take part in instruction, regardless of where or how that instruction is delivered. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought out the issue to the forefront in a way that can benefit students. As we have implemented fully virtual educational environment and have expanded access to internet and one-to-one student devices in Howard County, we're able to reimagine the ways in which the school system can provide useful quality instruction when schools are closed. Amending the age-old restrictions under Education Article 7-103 to allow Howard County the flexibility to use alternative instruction models is ripe for adoption, whether through virtual lessons on snow days, hard copy materials sent home for extended closures, or other synchronous or asynchronous solutions when in-person learning is not feasible or suitable. Our goal in requesting this bill is for allowing the continuity of learning. In developing an alternative instruction model, an emphasis would be placed on predictability and the quality of instruction through pre-planning, as opposed to tacking on days at the end of the school year when we know it is of less value. The bill includes a requirement to adopt a local policy to set parameters for the use of such models, allowing for stakeholder input, and necessitates equitable access when using technology, as well as negotiations to develop expectations in collaboration with our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the Board of Education's testimony. Just to take a minute here and tell anyone who's watching, if the clock is showing up as large on your screen, you can take your cursor and move it over. And then if we could also ask our administrator to work on that on the live stream, because right now on the live stream, what people are watching is mostly the clock. If you could work on fixing that. Thank you for that. And Andrew Stetner, you're up. Howard County 2.
All right, good evening. I'm testifying on behalf of the Howard County Autism Society in support of Howard County Bill 222 proposed by Senator Hester, which would shift the burden of proof in special education due process cases from parents to the school system. We are pleased that this bill recognizes the responsibility to prove with objective data that a given educational proposal is appropriate for that student. The reality is that the majority of parents are simply unable to afford counsel and may have difficulty paying to retain expert witnesses needed to challenge their child's program, something they are entitled to do under federal law. Many parents proceed pro se without legal representation at IDEA administrative hearings. The school district, however, is virtually always represented by counsel at such hearings. Additionally, the IDEA administrative hearing process provides only limited access to information. Parents cannot engage in a full range of discovery options that are available during a trial. This has serious implications for parents attempting to protect their child's legal right to a free, appropriate public education. The school system, on the other hand, has a great deal of information that may be presented in the form of testimony or in documents that the parents may receive only 5 days before the hearing. Because IDEA assigns primary responsibility for developing the educational program to the school district should have assembled the requisite evaluations, any other data, and presented them at an IEP meeting at which the proposal was made. Thus, there's no harm to school districts from requiring them to bear the burden in order to reinforce and protect parents' procedural rights and involvement in developing the IEP. We are pleased that the HCPSS has been involved in preparing this bill and recognizes that since the school is ready to support and justify its proposals, it makes it mean to parents. The school should already be prepared to present that case. For this reason, Howard County Autism Society strongly supports the proposed legislation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Stetner. Heather Kelso, followed by Heidi Abdelhadi, and then Barb Crupieres.
Sorry, I can't get my, oh, there's the video. Okay. Good evening. Thank you, Senator Hester, for this bill and for the support from the other delegates. I'm hoping you support shifting the burden of proof, the bill 2-22. The congressional intent of IDEA was to have the expertise of parents join the expertise of teachers to make a plan for the student. With the burden of proof on parents with limited resources against a system with almost unlimited resources, due process is felt as a threat by parents. Regardless of which team member is in disagreement, regardless of who files for due process, parents bear a burden. Shifting the burden to the system will decrease the threat and allow for an equal partnership in the IEP room as IDEA intended. This will allow parents breathing room and opportunities for meaningful discussion and collaboration. Due process is one avenue for dispute resolution, a very expensive, painful, and typically unsuccessful proposition for a parent. I have heard an advocate state it is cheaper to pay the $30,000 to $40,000 annual private school tuition for years than go through due process, where the burden of proof is on the parent. Unlike healthcare, education does not have the legal and ethical requirement of informed consent. Schools determine the curriculum and reading interventions that a child receives. This can be done without parent input. Currently, HCPSS has level literacy intervention as supplemental instruction listed on their ready-to-read page. This reading intervention harms a child. The school can decide without showing why this is appropriate or parent input. This is just one example. With the burden of proof on parents in due process, there is no equity. Most parents have to rely on public school systems that know time and resources are limited for parents. Parents are risking time, money, and their financial futures in the path of due process. Shifting the burden of proof from parent to school system is a matter of fairness and equity while preserving the goals of IDEA. Classroom teachers, parents, and students benefit from the shift. As a member of the special ed community, shifting the burden of proof would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Ms. Abdahaldi.
Yes, hello. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, wonderful. Good evening, Howard County delegation and fellow citizens. I'm Heidi Abdulhadi, a citizen and a parent of a child on the spectrum from District 12. I'm here in support of the Howard County Bill 2-22 as submitted by Senator Hester. And here's why. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act ensures that children with disabilities receive a free, appropriate public education, also known as FAPE, that may include special education and related services such as speech and OT, etc. FAPE is a statutory right for children with disabilities and is memorialized in a document called the Individualized Education Plan, or IEP. The IEP team includes school and school system-based staff and parents. With the IEP is created primarily by the school-based teams as per their assessments and observations. But when a disagreement occurs between parents and school teams that cannot be resolved at the IEP table, then resolution options range from formal dispute resolution to mediation and, sadly, to due process hearing before an administrative law judge. Now, here's where it gets interesting and where parents start at a disadvantage in their quest to advocate for their child. The IDEA administrative hearing process provides parents only limited access to information because parents cannot engage in full range of discovery options as is available in other legal proceedings. Let me repeat this. Parents do not have full range discovery options. However, school systems have a tremendous amount of information that is presented at trial, typically by expert testimony. This represents a gross imbalance in access to information and facts. This is why school systems are successful 85% of the time and parents only a mere 15%. Those 15% of parents are typically well-resourced as they are able to retain legal counsel, subject matter experts, consultants, and are able to take time off of work to participate fully in the proceedings. This brings into play inequity and disparity.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, your time has expired. If you could wrap up in a sentence or two, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Sure, no worries. So this often brings into play inequity and disparity, often along racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic lines, as poor and minoritized children are disproportionately identified for special education. This bill really serves to shift the burden of proof to the party with the information, where they must demonstrate either FAPE was or was not provided. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Ms. Crupieres coming up next, and I will say that the clock may not show up until you have 30 seconds left, so just be aware of that. The clock will be running, but you might not see it until you have 30 seconds left. Go ahead, Ms. Crupieres.
Okay, thank you. I'm testifying on two bills this evening.
Okay.
My name is Barb Groupiers, and I'm testifying in support of Hoco 2-22. I began testifying in support of shifting the burden of proof to schools and special education due process cases in 2014. I've since altered my view that I don't believe it will result in major changes for families, but it is still the right thing to do. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act states, a state must adopt a policy that includes a requirement that LEAs in the state take measurable steps to recruit, train, hire, and retain personnel who meet the applicable requirements to provide special education and related services to children with disabilities. There are no such training and retaining requirements for general education teachers who are also responsible for special education students. So how can teachers honestly meet the needs of these students when no one provides them the tools to do so? Maybe that's why the president of our teachers union also supports this bill. Keep in mind that parents cannot appeal to the local and state boards of ed in special education cases, like all other parents have the right to do. One of their only choices is to go to court. School systems have large budgets for contracted attorneys. They have their own created data to defend their actions. Parents have little to no access to that data. How can a parent fight what they don't know? All they know is that their children are being harmed. They can't recover costs if they hire their own experts to defend their case to a judge who has minimal training and hears maybe one special education case every 3 years. And what about the parents who can't afford an attorney and don't even know how to present evidence? They could lose on technicalities. I hope we care about low-income families in Howard County that have children with disabilities. The bottom line in shifting the burden of proof to schools is twofold. First, it would require the school system to present their proof that they're providing a student's legally required services and accommodations. Second, it means that all things being equal, the tie goes to the family in the hearing. How often are things equal in these cases? If a case is deemed frivolous, the parent could still be required to pay the school's legal fees. So this bill does not impart a great benefit to parents, it's just the right thing to do. Let's make Howard County the model for doing what is right for these kids. I'm also testifying in opposition to Hoco 122 as written. I support additional training of SROs, and I would like to see accountability measures in an MOU between the school system and the police department, such as a formal review process for complaints. But as a parent with children in our public schools, I worry about harmful events that an SRO in the building could prevent or minimize for students and teachers, as we saw with the SRO in St. Mary's County a couple of years ago. If there's a problem with a particular SRO, address it. If children are fearful of SROs, find a way to build relationships. But in my own experience with SROs, especially for my kid with a disability, it was very positive. The SRO protected my son from bullying. He built relationships with students, which helped avoid fights and other negative events. And he had more training on dealing with students with disabilities than most teachers. I appreciate that our county executive and state's attorney both support SROs in our school based on their Howard County experiences. My fear is if we have to call 911, we will have more arrests in our schools from inexperienced beat cops. But as a parent, my goal is to send our kids to school and then come home safely. And we want their teachers to be simply allowed to teach. I hope you will consider changing this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crupieras. We have James Cecil, followed by Brent Lovelace, followed by Jonathan Rivlin. Mr. Cecil. If you're out there, you're on mute, Mr. Cecil. All right, let's move on to Mr. Lovelace.
Hello, I assume we'll be bundling multiple bills, so I will be tagging all these together. The PTA Council of Howard County would like to thank the delegation for appearing at our fall meeting to explain upcoming bills and answer questions. We would also like to thank Ms. Hester for allowing PTAC to take a proactive stance in education advocacy by sponsoring the upcoming bill LR 744 regarding analytical support for future redistricting. Ideally, the PTA Council discusses legislation, provides information for local units, and votes as a body with local feedback from the delegates. This process usually takes more time than is available for the window of testimony concluding this evening, which means that official council positions on many of these items will be pending upcoming votes among our delegates, and results will be provided to the state delegation as they become available. Regarding Hoco 1, the welfare and safety of children is a prime concern to PTA members. We recognize there are many viewpoints in the application of security. Ideally, PTAC will be able to have representation in the security policy development, which calls out for input from community groups. So two-way feedback from our delegates can be sustained as this process matures. Burden of proof. This bill was discussed at our last general meeting. Both parents and educators discussed some pros and cons and decided that more detailed research and feedback from local delegates was necessary prior to creating an official position vote. We will be voting on this pending position in the December general meeting. Regarding housing trust funds, PTA Council does not have an official position on housing trust funds, but has recently been involved in multiple project decisions where exemptions to school overcrowding were a consideration, as well as the lack of funding for capacity expansion to handle that overcrowding. As of present, the school land acquisition and housing funding are both derived from shared portions of a county transfer tax. Our longstanding position that no school should have to operate above 100% capacity should be taken in consideration as these bills move forward. In regards to commercial excise tax, PTAC has long advocated towards school surcharges that are proportionate with growth. The state delegation has authorized the county to levy school surcharges, and it also is responsible for funding ongoing maintenance and renovations not related to development and growth. The effectiveness of both these sources should be reviewed at this point to ensure adequate resources for schools are available for growth and sustainment without conflicting priorities and conflicting with each other. In regards to 922, alternate instruction, the details of this bill came out relatively recently for review by our membership. On the surface, it seems like it fills gaps required for learning during events, and a provision that the teacher bargaining units approve of the process. This will be discussed at our December meeting for potential feedback to the delegation. PTAC's prime role is to support its local units and advocate for children. As a nonpartisan organization, we may not provide a position on some items, but rather inform members of education-related items so they may advocate as individuals. We thank you for your continued support of the education system and invite all state delegation members to share legislative feedback with our organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lovelace. Mr. Rivlin, you're up.
Delegate Watson and all the council and everybody. My name is Jonathan Rivlin. I'm from Font Hill, and I'll be testifying on 6 bills, and I can do it under 5 minutes. I've been practicing. Okay, I'm going to go in order. So, all right, with regards to bill number 1, the police officers in schools, last year I spoke about this and echoed the person that spoke earlier about the concern for safety in the schools. Later in that meeting last year, another person weighed in with the statistics saying that not having police officers in the school did not make the schools less safe. So whoever that person was, I just want to say thank you. This public discussion is very important. And I know this is a controversial issue. I have police officers in my family. I used to work for a police department. But my take on this is that there's suffering in the community. My friends and neighbors say they're suffering, and I want to support this bill and encourage others to support this bill for the sake of our friends and neighbors who are suffering. And the bill, at least as I've read it, appears that it should be able to bring in the favorable parts of having police officers involved with school, but also minimize the suffering. With regards to Bill 2-22, the due process, I have a child who was on an IEP and then was moved to a 504. And I felt like my wife and I were just walking into a meat grinder. The administration was very well prepared. They threw a lot of jargon at us. They spoke very quickly. And it just seemed like it was a predetermined decision, and they just needed to cajole us into signing off on it. And we should have had an attorney. And this is our government. We're paying taxes for this. And so I would support this bill. Thank you. With regards to Bill 5, housing communities, going off of the first bill, anything we can do to alleviate suffering is a good thing. And if this bill would increase affordable housing in the community, that's great. However, if you're having more people live in the community, what are you doing with schools? So you have to couple a bill like this with increased school capacity. Otherwise, you're just concentrating more and more people in overcrowded schools, and that's not going to alleviate poverty. With regards to Bill 6, judges sitting on the orphans court, I can't support anything that would constrain appeals rights. I have to oppose this bill on that line right there. With that said, I do like the fact that the bill tries to professionalize and depoliticize the judicial function. It's not right. I never understood that. But I can't support something that takes away appeals rights. That's scary. With regards to Bill 8, commercial building excise tax, of course we need to do something about the deferred maintenance, but while businesses benefit from having an educated populace that gives employees and customers it's not just businesses that should share the burden. A tax like this should be broad. And also, I would say it shouldn't be a specific time frame in which it should sunset. Once the backlog is clear, whenever that is, that's when the tax should go away. I'm saying this as an accountant. I just, it's what I do for a living. Lastly, Bill 9, public schools. Thank you for this. I always wondered why at the end of the year there was like 3 or 4 half days tacked on at the end. That just seemed ridiculous. There was no learning going on there. It was just more of an annoyance to everyone. So if this can alleviate that, great. Which my one concern is that the bill's language seemed a little vague at this point, and I would just be concerned about it creating some sort of opaque line of authority that the delegation didn't intend. That's all I would say on that. Okay, just a few general points about all this stuff. The last time we did this live, a person got up to testify about a bill that would require an extra disclosure about school districts and real estate contracts. And she said she didn't want her kids going to school with peasants. And I thought that the delegation missed an opportunity to educate this person who wasn't born here to say, it's great you're participating in government, but we're all equal in this country. We don't have peasants in America. I thought you guys missed that opportunity to say that. And lastly, I would just ask, we have these hearings and it's great that we're all participating. And I appreciate very much the discussion, but what happens between the end of this meeting and the end of the General Assembly when these bills don't pass? What are we doing? And that's my time. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Rivlin. We appreciate your testimony. And I just want to check back to make sure James Cecil is given one last chance on Hoco 2 before we move on to Bill 9. James Cecil? Okay, we're moving on to Bill 9, and we have Leonardo McCarty from the Howard County Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, and excuse me. Good evening, members of the delegation and Delegate Watson and Senator Lamb and others. So I actually have 4 bills that I will be speaking to. And actually, is the clock being shared? I actually can't see it on my end, but I'll speak fast. So I guess in the first thing in terms of Bill 9, which is the...
You have 5 minutes and she will let you know when you're within 45 seconds.
Okay, all right, excellent. So the first is remote learning, and I'll be quick on that one. Ultimately, I think this is a bill that just simply makes sense, particularly when we look at the amount of money that has been spent both locally as well as from a federal perspective to bring laptops to all of our students, as well as also to enhance the learning environment. And particularly when you think about it from a workforce development standpoint, businesses during the course of last year had to be able to adapt to both virtual meetings, presentations, and so forth. And so we see this also, besides the instruction side of things, it's another way of preparing our young people for the workplace and being able to adapt. And again, if we have the tools and the technology, it makes sense to be able to start implementing those. And I think, as the gentleman just mentioned earlier, we do have a part during the end of the year where the last few days of a school year, and in many respects, from now taking my chamber hat off and putting a parent hat on, it really does seem like a waste. And so this is another way to really provide quality instruction when there may be inclement weather and so forth, and take advantage of the technology that we have now. So that's for Bill Hoco 9. The other bill that I wanted to speak to was Hoco 13-22, which pertains to alcoholic beverages and consumption only at the shopping mall plaza. And again, I think this is another bill in which it can continue to support our restaurants. Over the last year or so, many local jurisdictions, Howard County including, have been very flexible in terms of trying to be creative in ways to support our restaurants, whether it be outdoor seating or carry out alcohol and so forth. At times, restaurants that may be at a mall setting perhaps don't have some of that same flexibility as if they were a standalone eatery or what have you. And so again, this is another way to continue to support an industry that's really been devastated over the last year financially as a result of COVID-19. And so the chamber is in support of Hoco 13. The next bill is, let's see, we've talked about Hoco 9. The other two would be, lastly is Hoco 5-22 in terms of the Housing Opportunities Trust Fund. And so I've had an opportunity to be a part of the Housing Opportunities Master Plan and Task Force. And certainly, again, this was one of those recommendations, but also beyond that, again, looking at it from a business perspective, this is also one of those, the issue of affordable housing is one that certainly many of our employees talk about with some of their employees that may be on the lower rung from a economic perspective in terms of the wages that they earn and so forth. It also ties back to our infrastructure as well in terms of how far people are driving to and from work, et cetera. And so again, this is another way to continue to implement the master plan, as well as to further be supportive of a full spectrum of housing beyond just the affordability for young professionals, but also as we look at seniors, as we look at those with disabilities as well. And the last bill is the commercial excise tax in Hoco 822. Certainly, we understand the many challenges facing our school system from a deferred maintenance standpoint. But again, this is one that we've actually have opposed, I think, probably each year that it's been introduced, and certainly are in opposition again this year. You know, when you look at, we can't just always look to tax business every time there is perhaps a need, and certainly that's what it appears, is that anytime there's a need or a shortfall of any sort, it's let's go and add another tax or fee for businesses. And certainly we want to continue to be competitive, both regionally as well. And when I say regionally, in terms of with our neighboring counties, as well as also regionally as relates across the, you know, when you look at DC and Maryland and Virginia as well. And certainly we would be the only county to have something of this magnitude. And again, coming off the heels of COVID, the last thing we want to do is to continue to make our county a more expensive place to do business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McClarty. We are moving on now to Bill 3, and we have Mark Betterami. And you're on mute, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi. Good evening. Mark Verdery, Major with the Howard County Sheriff's Office, and I'll be in support of this bill. The scope, task, and responsibility of the Sheriff's Office has greatly increased and expanded over the past 3 years. Our staff has increased by approximately 25%. The new courthouse, Circuit Courthouse complex, is 3 times larger than the old courthouse. There is a 6-story level parking garage on the courthouse grounds. And as such, the sheriff is charged with protecting more citizens, more defendants, witnesses, more judges, as well as additional departments now that are housed at the complex, such as the State's Attorney's Office and the Land Records Unit. The sheriff is accountable for an increased budget, increased hiring, increased training, increased fleet, equipment. In addition to that, the sheriff's office has created a community outreach unit, which has been very successful in our community. This endeavor particularly is organized, manned, distributed food, for example, with the mobile food banks during the COVID. We also hand out book bags, and we're very involved with the sheriff's office, very involved with the community, that added responsibility. Additionally, we partner with the police department and the drone project, and of course, you're all aware of the body-worn camera project that is being instituted. All this has led to more responsibilities and tasks. This bill's passed would establish the sheriff's pay scale that would be in line with the county's pay scale in relationship to jobs with like responsibilities and authority. A byproduct of this legislation would be the legislator would never need to address the sheriff's salary again, which is now every 4 years. The legislation would allow the county to be aware of fixed pay scale and budget accordingly. And then finally, the bill would attract highly qualified candidates. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being here tonight. And I'm going to turn this over to Senator Lamb to take the next several bills.
All right, thank you, Chairperson Watson. We are going to go next to Howard County 6-22. This is Circuit Court for Howard County, judges sitting at the Orphans Court. We're going to go in the following order for this bill. We're going to start with Register Wills Byron McFarland, followed by 2 members of the Orphans Court, Ann Dodd, and then Leslie Turner Smith. So we'll start with Register Wills Byron McFarland. Mr. McFarland, you there? All right, I'm not seeing him here. Oh, he is here. We're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now. All right, go ahead.
All right, great. Well, good evening, Chairs Lamb and Watson, members of the delegation. I'm here to express my strong support for Hoco 622, which would end elections for Orphans Court judges and vest jurisdiction over probate matters with the Circuit Court. As Registrar of Wills over the last 11 years, I've observed our current system and studied systems in neighboring jurisdictions and states. Howard County is one of only 19 counties out of over 3,000 in America that holds partisan elections for a part-time panel of 3 judges who are not required to be lawyers. Simply put, this is an historical anomaly in need of reform. This bill promises a more efficient, more reliable, and more equitable process for grieving families and resolves numerous systemic shortcomings. Let me list just a few. First, we would no longer burden voters with figuring out what they're voting for when they get to judges of the Orphans Court. Virtually no one understands this court and very few people interact with them directly. In fiscal 2021, for example, the total number of county residents who attended a hearing before this court out of a total population of over 330,000 was 47. Second, we would give families the confidence that their matters are heard by a fully vetted, trained attorney judge. Maryland abolished most of its lay courts in the 1970s, and the Orphans Court survived that reform movement only because they are elected. Translation, pure politics won over good policy. Third, we would give families a system that is far more efficient. Our current court is part-time and comprised of 3 judges, and that means delays, and requiring a majority of 3 judges to act means time-consuming disagreements. Lastly, we would not be reinventing the wheel. We have registers of wills in circuit courts in Hartford and Montgomery counties that have enacted the same reforms decades ago and whose administrative procedures could easily be replicated here. The state judiciary's motto, its promise, is efficient, fair, effective justice for all. Unfortunately, our current system fails to live up to that promise. Hoco 622 will fix this for the benefit of all of our communities once and for all. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. McFarland. Next, we will have Chief Judge Ann Dodd of the Orphans Court, followed by Leslie Smith Turner, and then followed by Mr. Joel Horowitz. Chief Judge Dodd.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Ann Dodd, and I've been Chief Judge of the Howard County Orphans Court for the past 7 years. The Orphans Court is quick, cheap, efficient, and user-friendly. It was designed to be a less formal court. Time is of the essence, especially when the death of a principal could cause a business to collapse. The cost for controversial matters is only $20, and we allow the time and space for grieving litigants to air their frustrations. When we hold hearings, most of the orders are drafted and signed that same day. Probate law is best suited for a court solely dedicated to that subject matter, especially because we deal with so many pro se litigants. This bill eliminates the advantages of the Orphans Court and increases the burden on the Circuit Court. The Orphans Court is funded entirely by Howard County, while Circuit Court judges are funded by the state. Eliminating our entire budget would save the county much less than the salary of one Circuit Court judge, but it would most certainly add to the cost borne by the state. No Orphans Court judge in Howard County makes as much as $20,000 a year. While some might think all courts are the same, the Orphans Court is a court of special limited jurisdiction. The rules that apply to the operation of the Circuit Court do not universally apply to the Orphans Court. Only certain sections of the civil procedures used by the Circuit Court apply to the Orphans Court unless specifically invoked, and the rules of evidence are not strictly applied, except in the case of competency of witnesses. When parties are at odds, one side is not always happy with the outcome. In the 11 years that I've been on the bench, we have signed approximately 10,000 orders, and the number is increasing. There have been only 45 appeals, and we've been overturned just 2.5 times. The half was granted in part, denied in part. Since neither the administrative judge of the Howard County Circuit Court nor I were consulted or even given a heads up before this legislation was drafted, it's difficult to know just why this bill was introduced. I don't know what improvement would be gained by this change or why there is a belief that improvement is even necessary. My door is always open, and I encourage you to communicate your concerns to me directly. Thank you. I do have to say that I'm not testifying on behalf of the Maryland Judiciary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Judge Dodd. And next we are going to go to Judge Leslie Smith Turner, also with the Orphans Court, followed by Joel Horowitz. And then after that, we'll move on to 5-22 with Kelly Semino on deck. Judge Turner. Judge Turner, you may need to unmute. I see that you're on, but you're still muted.
I'm sorry. Can I start again? May I start again?
Yeah, we didn't hear you, so go ahead. You can start again.
Good evening, all. I'm Leslie Smith Turner, MA-JD. I've had the pleasure and privilege of serving the Howard County community on its Orphans Court bench. I'm opposing Hoco 622. The Orphans Court is not required to have an all-attorney bench, but I've been on the Howard County bench for 11 years, and it has not been without an attorney those years. Wish to point out that rulings require a consensus of only 2 jurists. It functions like the U.S. Supreme Court, the majority rules. Even though we have hearings 1 day a week, Wednesday, as many as 4 on that day, we have to prepare for them. Plus we get very little pay. Plus, I have had close to 30 matters a day on Tuesdays, not to mention conference meetings, Maryland Association of Orphans Court Judges meetings, joint meetings that have statewide representatives from estates and trusts section of the Maryland State Bar, local bar associations, the state comptroller's office, the Maryland Attorney General's office, different county register of wills offices, and different orphans court. I have yet to see a circuit court judge from Montgomery or Hartford County present at any of these meetings. These are meetings where state and local issues are presented for possible resolution. We've had 2.5 cases overturned in 11 years. That's a remarkable record for any bench at any level. We have not had grievances filed against us. My understanding is that Montgomery County, in Montgomery County, in which the circuit court sits as the orphans court, the judges 20 plus rotate bi-weekly in that role, which means that incomplete cases move from one judge to another. It appears as if the litigants in that county, because they're with the circuit court, do not have the continuity and consistency in Howard County. The Orphans Court in Howard County has served the Howard County community well for many decades. If it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, thank you, Judge Turner. Next, we have Mr. Joel Horowitz, who's testifying on a few bills, including Howard County 6-22, 5-22, 8-22, 10-22, the Ellicott City drop arm, last mile fiber, as well as the Veterans Monument. Those last ones are legislative bond initiatives. It will be followed by Kelly Semino, and then behind that, Councilperson Deb Young. Mr. Horowitz, go ahead.
Good evening, Senator Lamb, members of the delegation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. My problem with 6-2 is with section 6. For the few people that might be having a hearing at the time, they're already arguing over their family members' will, and now they'll have a new dispute over what court to hear it. It seems to need better transition language for smooth transfer of any pending cases or any cases that might be appealed in the time period that they still have. The effective date is the date of the proclamation by the governor whenever he gets around to that. Perhaps you needed a fixed effective date like January 1st. Hoco 2 has a set effective date for the burden of proof change. I think it's July 1st in the bill. So need a provision to transfer the cases to the circuit court, or for those that are already in the circuit court, or maybe allowing people to pick and choose if they go to the circuit court or the Court of Special Appeals for those that are pending at the time. Perhaps people will answer the questions, my problems with Bill 5 on the housing next, but I'm opposed to it, and I'll get to that. Last year, the county council rejected the proposal from the Charter Review Commission to increase the size of the council. And last spring, the council rejected the Housing Opportunities Trust Fund in the budget, and I believe rightfully so, because it was nothing more than a line item in the county executive's budget. There was no provision in the code about how the money would be spent or who would be in charge of it and who would make those decisions. For months since, I have waited and thought that the county executive would introduce legislation for the council to consider. And then I learned that apparently the council got those two new council members, Gazzoni and Feldmark, because they've written what I believe is the county executive's bill. As a charter county, Howard County should not be micromanaged as it has been for decade after decade by Annapolis. We're supposed to have home rule. The Express Powers Act provides for a charter county to deal with housing projects where it says the county may provide the financing of any housing.
Mr. Horowitz, I think your mic may have become detached, or you're coming in very fuzzy, so it's hard to hear you.
I said,
I think we're still having a hard time hearing you. Yeah, that's not any better, unfortunately. If you can't seem to resolve it, I think maybe we can pause you and come back to you afterwards. You want to try one more time?
How's this?
You're very faint, but you're at least clearer. Go ahead.
Oh, eat the microphone here. As I was saying, the housing projects is in the Express Powers Act, and I believe that this should be a council bill, not from the General Assembly. In Bill 8, technically, I believe it's inconsistent to say that you're going to put the money into the general fund and then have it restricted. The existing building excise tax has a development road improvement fund, and it would seem it's going to go the trouble to have a dedicated fund rather than the general fund. Am I hearing okay now, Senator?
Yeah, it's better. Continue. Not great, but go ahead.
Local 10, I don't really understand the purpose or how it would work with all the other confusing now number of credits. It seems it would benefit very few people to meet the requirements, and assuming, which is unlikely, that there was a 5-cent increase in the tax rate on a $300,000 home, I calculate that would be only $150 in savings of the increase. So I'm not sure how seniors are supposed to do this with all the other credits that they're also having to apply for. I'm in favor of the Ellicott City drop arm. I've been putting it on surveys for several years and didn't know anybody was actually working on doing that. It would save the police and have a quicker way of blocking off the roads. For the last mile fiber, want to make sure that the county doesn't have unexpended American Rescue Plan money or state rescue plan, especially now that we're getting more money in the infrastructure bill. And I wonder if when we talk about it, can we even spend all this broadband money in the next couple of years, considering the shortages of chips and other equipment. Make sure I miss anything here. And the Veterans Monument is the highest request on this list. And I'd hope that by making a monument, you're not leaving unmet needs for actual helping of real veterans with their homelessness, PTSD, substance abuse, or disabilities, which would go unfunded if the state was to fund a monument rather than a building or a program to support the veterans themselves. So I hope you heard enough of that.
Thank you, Mr. Horowitz. Next, we're going to transition to Howard County 5-22, which is Department of Housing and Community Development, Housing Opportunities Trust Fund. First up, we have Ms. Kelly Simino from the Department of Housing and Community Development as its director, followed by Councilperson Deb Young, followed by Jackie Yang with the Howard County Housing Affordability Coalition. Ms. Simino, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Senator Lamb. Good evening. Kelly Simino, Director of the Howard County Department of Housing and Community Development, on behalf of the administration, testifying in support of Hoco Bill 522. Would like to thank Delegate Fellmark and Senator Gazzoni for this introducing this bill. Part of the county's economic appeal depends on the availability of equitable and affordable housing opportunities for people that want to live in the county. There is already a significant unmet housing need for limited income households and people with disabilities, and this gap is widening. The county recently completed the Housing Opportunities Master Plan. This plan emphasizes the importance of residential options that would provide a greater diversity of housing stock, including differing product types such as multifamily apartments, higher density single-family attached or townhome options, and single-family rental units that could make housing more attainable for a diverse audience. The Housing Opportunities Trust Fund would be an important tool to address the critical housing infrastructure needs facing our county. The fund would be administered by the Department of Housing and Community Development to promote and support equitable, geographically dispersed, and affordable rental and for sale housing opportunities throughout the county, and assist in alleviating the difficulties of many low and moderate income households to obtain, to meet their needs and find housing that they can afford. It would also help with rental assistance, home ownership, home improvements, and other affordable housing opportunities. The department would provide an annual report of revenue and expenditures to the county council as referenced in the bill, and we feel that the Housing Opportunities Trust Fund could create and promote equitable access to affordable housing opportunities for low and moderate income households in Howard County. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Simino. Next, we will move to Councilperson Deb Young, representing District 4, followed by Jackie Yang, and then Don Pop. Councilperson Young,
Senator
go ahead.
Lamb. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you there. Good evening, Chairs Lamb and Watson and members of the delegation. My name is Deb Young, and I currently serve as a county council member for District 4. This testimony does represent my own views and not that of the body. At the outset, I want to state that I support the creation of an Affordable Housing Opportunities Trust Fund. In fact, I agree with everything that Ms. Simino just said. And I knew I would get a smile out of her from that, okay? However, for the same reasons that Mr. Horowitz brought up, I oppose this legislation because it conflicts with county home rule, which expressly grants charter counties authority to provide for the financing of housing and housing projects in Howard County. This is set out in section 10-312D of the local government article of the Maryland Code. This bill pertains solely to the operations of a county government housing department, responsible for, among other things, housing finance. The General Assembly cannot legislate by public local law for a charter county on a subject covered by the Express Powers Act as cited above. And I will tell you, Ms. Simino, my office has been working on starting some sort of Housing Opportunities Trust Fund for the last 3 months since we talked about the Housing Master Plan. I would love to support you at the local level to do something like this, but not in this way. If the issue that this bill is trying to address is that involving year-end reversion of trust funds, which may require a charter amendment like the Citizens Election Fund. I would urge you to craft a bill that is public general law, enabling local jurisdictions to create such trust funds and address the issue of fund reversion to the extent that it exists on a statewide basis. This would allow jurisdictions to tailor their trust funds to suit local conditions and concerns and not require state legislation to amend the program should it be necessary. Such an approach would respect the spirit of county home rule. Thank you. And call me Miss Simino.
All right, thank you, Councilperson Young. Next, we will move to Jackie Eng with the representing Howard County Housing Affordability Coalition, followed by Don Pop, and then Linda Leslie. Ms. Eng, go ahead.
Good evening, Chairs Lamb and Watson and delegation members. On behalf of the Housing Affordability Coalition, it's my privilege to express the coalition's strong support for Hoco 522. We certainly appreciate Senator Gazzoni and Delegate Feldmark introducing this legislation that will establish the Housing Opportunities Trust Fund. The need for affordable rental housing and homeownership opportunities has been well documented, most recently in the 2021 Housing Opportunities Master Plan and the background generated by the Hoco by Design initiative. The master plan specifically recommends creation of a trust fund, which is a formal, coordinated, and predictable structure for allocating housing funding. This legislation is the critical first step in establishing such a fund, thereby enabling the Department of Housing and Community Development to put in place the administrative structure to ensure Hoco 5's goal of equitable access to affordable housing for households of limited income in Howard County. Housing trust funds are being used successfully in other jurisdictions across the country, and particularly in neighboring jurisdictions, to support clear action plans that facilitate an affordable housing vision and long-term strategies. As importantly, a housing trust fund provides a vehicle that enables diversified funding that can augment county contributions to ensure that the fund is sustainable over the long term. Howard County studies related to economic growth and quality of life have observed that much of the current and future economic success of the county depends on its continuing to be an appealing place to live and work. Critical element of the county's economic appeal depends on the availability of equitable and affordable housing opportunities for all people who want to live here. The lack of such housing ultimately will hamper the ability of the county to grow as an economic hub as it becomes hard to recruit workers who may be priced out of the local market. I appreciate your consideration of the coalition's perspective. We look forward to working with the delegation to move Hoco 5 onto and through the General Assembly. And I just want to take 20 seconds to say what I did not sign up for, but I just also want to convey the coalition's strong support for the Patuxent Commons Bond Bill. Thank you all very much.
Great, thank you, Ms. Eng. Next, we will move to Don Pop, who's testifying on two bills, Howard County 5-22 and 1-22. She'll be followed by Linda Leslie, after which we'll move to Howard County 12-22, sorry, with Karina Fisher on deck. Ms. Pop, go ahead. Ms. Pop, I think you're still muted. So I see you on, but we're not hearing you. Ms. Pop, you're, looks like you're still muted. Can you hear me? Okay. Looks like we're not able to get her on. If she's able to come back at some point, we can have her testify on these two bills. In the meantime, why don't we go to next to Ms. Linda Leslie. Ms. Leslie, are you there? Don't think I see Ms. Leslie on. She may have had to drop off.
Okay, can you hear me now? I'm so
Oh, we can
sorry.
hear you now.
I'm having technical issues and I could not unmute. So
Oh, no worries. Go
I
ahead.
really apologize. Okay, good evening. My name is Dawn Pop and I live in Elk Ridge in District 12. I'm testifying tonight in support of two bills, Hoco 522 and Hoco 122. First, I'd like to speak briefly in support of Hoco 522, establishing a Housing Opportunities Trust Fund for Howard County. The lack of affordable housing is one of the most pressing issues facing this county. After testifying last night in support of the county bill to raise our minimum wage, I've been thinking a lot about the fact that so many of our essential workers cannot afford to live in the community that their work helps to make such a wonderful place to live. And too few of the young people growing up in this county will be able to afford to stay and raise their own families here, as I was lucky enough to do. I applaud this bill as an important step in making more affordable housing opportunities available so that Howard County remains the vibrant, diverse, and welcoming community that it has been since my family moved here 50 years ago. I urge you all to support this bill. And now I'll move on to Hoco 122. A recent study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that media coverage of anti-Black violence, including police killings, led to negative mental health effects among Black Americans, which were not experienced by their white counterparts. Why do I bring this up? Because it's just one example of the fact that white people like me, and like many of the members of this delegation, are not impacted by the systemic racism in this country the way that our Black and brown friends, neighbors, and colleagues are. And specifically, we very likely have very different perspectives regarding policing. As you consider this legislation, please remember that we are not all viewing this issue through the same lens, nor are our children. Despite the popular belief that having police officers in our schools helps to prevent tragic events like school shootings, a growing body of research shows that this is not actually the case. What the research does show, however, is that school policing disproportionately harms students of color, as well as students with disabilities and LGBTQ+ students. Keeping SROs in our schools in the face of such research is prioritizing the perception of safety among certain parts of our community over addressing the very real harm they cause to many of our students. To truly keep our students safe, we must use proactive strategies like additional school supports, mental health professionals, and restorative justice programs. These strategies maintain school safety by addressing the underlying root causes of student misbehavior and targeting mental health supports to students before they consider violence. By replacing SROs with school coverage officers, this bill would ensure that we have adequate safety measures in place in our schools without continuing the harm that comes from having police officers on site on a daily basis. And it would require HCPSS to implement the kinds of proactive strategies that have been proven to enhance safety, taking into account the perspectives of those that have been most negatively affected by the SRO program, perspectives that have too often been overshadowed by louder voices. I urge you all to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pop. I'm glad we were able to get you in right now. Let's see if Linda Leslie is on. We still don't see her on. Ms. Leslie, are you there? Okay, sounds like she's not with us anymore. So we'll move on to Hoco 12-22, which is a commercial building excise tax. Board of Education deferred maintenance. We will hear from Ms. Karina Fisher, who's representing the Howard County Sierra Club. This will be followed by another bill, Howard County 10-22, with Diane Edwards, followed by Howard County 11-22 and Mr. Jack Malani. So Ms. Fisher on Howard County 12-22, are you there? All right, I'm not seeing her in the participant list. Ms. Fisher, if you're there, please speak up. All right, if not, we will move on to the next bill, Howard County 10-22, property tax credits for seniors to offset property tax rate increase. We have one person testifying on this. That is Diane Edwards. You may be on the phone. Ms. Edwards, are you there? Ms. Edwards, if you're there, you're muted. If you're on the phone, you may need to manually unmute yourself. Okay, it doesn't look like she is there either. For anyone who's not able to be here, obviously, you're welcome to submit written testimony afterwards, and we'll distribute that to the delegation. Since she's not here, we will move on to the next bill, which is Howard County 11-22. This is alcoholic beverages, limitation on issuance and renewal of 3 Class A licenses. And we have Mr. Jack Milani representing the Maryland State Licensed Beverage Association. Mr. Milani.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Lamb.
All right, go
2
ahead.
bills tonight, 11-22 and 13-22.
That's right.
Take 11-22 first. Supportive of the bill, we have asked the sponsor to take out the renewal portion of the bill, and I don't want to speak for her, but I think she'll be agreeable to that, and we'd be more than happy to work on the proportional language. On 13-22, also supportive. We would ask the sponsor to make sure that the owner of the shopping center, if it's an LLC, a member would be the licensee, or if it's a corporation, an officer would be the licensee, which is consistent with how we do licenses for corporations and LLCs. But both bills that we can very easily work with you on and support both of them. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Milani. Appreciate the short, succinct testimony there. I think for the next series of bills, we will turn it over to our House Chair, Delegate Watson.
Thank you, Senator Lamb. We are going to hear Howard County 13 now, and we have Barb Nicholas followed by Tom Meacham. Ms. Nicholas, are you with us?
I am. Can you see me?
Yes.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the Howard County Delegation, and thank you, Senator Gazzoni, for introducing this bill. My name is Barb Nicholas, and I'm the Senior General Manager of the mall in Columbia. As you may remember, the mall was among the first entities to be closed last March when the pandemic appeared in Howard County. Our restaurants were immediately impacted and strived to survive, initially on takeout and delivery. Months later, when outdoor dining was allowed, the state and county made it possible for expanded outdoor patios that brought not only much needed traffic and business to the restaurants, but also a greater sense of engagement and community to our outdoor plaza. This legislation would allow us to build upon that and create a seamless, expanded, and richer customer experience by allowing customers purchasing alcoholic beverages at our restaurants to carry and consume these within a defined outdoor area. Additionally, it would allow the same restaurants to participate in landlord-hosted special events within the designated outdoor area through the sampling and selling of alcoholic beverages. So here are some of the details that we see this coming alive at the mall in Columbia. First, the proposed designated outdoor area would go from the common area plaza starting north side of the center at Shake Shack and continuing to Uncle Julio's on the southwest. Signage, we would have permanent signage posted in conspicuous areas in this designated outdoor area with all the relevant information and additional signage for any of the special events. Security, most important. The mall in Columbia currently has a 24/7 security staff with CCTV cameras throughout its interior and exterior. We would significantly expand our outdoor security presence and work closely with the Howard County Police Department to develop a safe and secure plan for both the consumption only as well as the special event aspects of this bill. So in summary, the Mall in Columbia supports Hoco 1322 and thanks the delegation for its consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Nicholas. And we have Tom Meacham up next.
Good evening, Tom Meacham. I'm here in support of Bill 13-22. Chairpersons Lamb and Watson, delegation members. I've been working with Barb Nicholas on making the concept into legislation. We thank Senator Gazzoni and his staff for all of their efforts in bringing this about. This would be a great support, as Senator Ghizzoni said, to the restaurants at the mall and the mall itself. I don't have anything other than that to add. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those. If not, that concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Meacham. And we're moving on to Council Bill 8. We're going to begin with Robert Enton, and then that would be followed by Tom Ballantyne, and Drew Roth will be the last person to testify on Bill 8.
Hi, this is Bob Enton. I don't know if you can, there I am. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Robert Enton. I'm an attorney and I represent the Maryland Building Industry Association. You have our written testimony. I did have a chance to communicate with the sponsor yesterday and today, and told her of our opposition. We were opposed to a similar bill, I think for the last 2 years. In particular, at this time in the state of Maryland, and I guess around the country, I don't think anybody's taken as bad a hit as retailers. Retailers and that operate in commercial buildings. You just have to drive down the street and look at any shopping center and see all the vacant stores. You drive down the street and you look up at a high-rise apartment house that has retail operations on the ground floor, and you see they're for rent. You see that they're vacant. So we think for timing right now, the commercial real estate market has taken, and frankly, I think with the number of people that are working remotely, just like we're remote this evening, it's a very, very tough time. I'd also point out that according to the comptroller, recent testimony from the comptroller, that there's roughly $5 billion in unanticipated revenue for FY23 coming to the state. The Board of Revenue estimates put that number at $3.8 billion for the surpluses that we'll receive. Under the recently enacted federal legislation, there's $7.5 billion specifically designated for the state of Maryland. I think that if we need to get money spent on education, that's really worthy cause. But I think we also have the funds to do that without negatively impacting so many business people that have already been put in terrible shape by the pandemic. And for those reasons, we oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Ballantyne. Mr. Ballantyne, we can't hear you if you are speaking.
No, I haven't started yet, but my video is not starting, but I'll, in the interest of time, my name's Tom Ballantyne. I'm here on behalf of NAIOP Maryland. We're a commercial real estate trade association. We are opposed to the bill and have been for several years for technical and policy reasons. I think I'd start with just our point of view on the building excise tax is that it is part of the development process, part of the facilities management process that's been accepted and ingrained in the way that the county manages its facilities. And there's a rational reason for that it funds expanded transportation, expanded road and intersection improvements, expanded capacity that's necessary because of new development projects. We don't see that same connection here. This is a bill that would charge future development for deferred maintenance, future commercial development for deferred school maintenance. And we just don't see a good connection there. And don't see a rationale to proceed in this way. The transfer tax that we supported last session is a broader approach. It's a mechanism that's more indicative of increased demand for services, and we still think is preferable to adding the commercial excise tax at this time. We still pay it along with other residents and property owners in the county, but it's a better approach that you took and provided that authority to the council. I think there's still 50 basis points of headroom left in the authorization that you provided the council that has yet to be used. I just caution quickly against being over-reliant on commercial tax revenues, especially transactional commercial tax revenues. We're ending the bull market of most people's lifetime. And the uncertainty around commercial real estate is very high. I'd also, just in quick closing, just point out that we would very much like to see more information about the nature and the extent of the backlog, the intersection between capital spending that's going to draw down some of this backlog, and the inconsistencies between some of the information we've seen from the school system and what the interagency committee's report on maintenance showed, which weren't entirely consistent. I'll stop there. I apologize for going over.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. We now have Drew Roth.
Hi, I'm Drew Roth. I am testifying in opposition to Bill 822, which proposes a new commercial building excise tax with revenues limited to use on deferred school maintenance projects. I am a resident of Elk Ridge. Elk Ridge has 1/7 of the population of Howard County. We do not have a high school in Elk Ridge, and our high school students attend severely and chronically overcrowded schools far from their home. Communities which are privileged to have uncrowded neighborhood schools should not have privileged access to tax revenues for their particular projects. The revenue from this new excise tax should be available for all communities' needs, including new school construction and not just deferred maintenance projects. If we are going to discuss how much money is needed to meet the maintenance backlog for Howard County schools, this discussion should tell the whole story and also include how much money is needed to build the additional school capacity needed in Howard County so that no student has to attend school in a trailer. When Howard County increased the impact fees on new development a few years ago, the revenue raised was available to all school projects. That revenue was not limited to only new school construction for the new development. The same principle should apply with this bill. All school capital projects should be eligible for funding with this revenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. And now we are moving on to some of the bond bills, starting with the Bain 50+ Center. And we should have Jackie Scott with us tonight. There she is, and she's on mute. There you go.
There I am. I'm off mute. Thank you. Thank you for having us this evening. Chairwoman Watson, I'd like to, on behalf of the Department of Community Resources and Services and the Department of Public Works, testify on 3 bond bills that we have before you this evening. The first being the Bain 50+ Center. We are testifying in support and asking for your support in the improvements that this bond bill will allow us to complete for the Bain Center. As many of you know, the Bain Center is the beacon of our 50+ Center family, as it's one of the original and established over 40 years ago. Yet this bill will help us complete some of the renovations that we were able to begin in 2020. We had some limited renovations in 2005. We then had more extensive renovations in 2020. And this will allow us to then complete those. Specifically, we're looking to replace what we think are the original skylights in the Bain Center and some roofing work, which will then allow us to be more weather efficient and energy efficient there. And then do some additional internal cosmetics improvements in the lobby. We get a lot of use there. And so we are replacing furniture and doing some other internal interior renovations. So this will help us complete what we hope will be our ability to expand the services at Bain and take on the increased ability to serve the folks in that community that really come to enjoy the Bain Center when we can fully reopen. We are currently serving people at each of our centers and trying to get them more back involved after being away for 18 months or more in the pandemic. The second bond bill I'd like to speak with you about is the improvements on the East Columbia existing 50-plus center. On behalf of the Department of Public Works and Ndcrs, we're requesting that your support on that project. As many of you know, we are excited to start the building for the new 50-plus center in East Columbia. And so we are now turning our attention to the existing space. Our hope is to build a multi-service center capacity in the neighborhood in the existing space of the 50-plus center, which will allow us to create a campus-like facility so that we are adjoined to the library, but this center will be focused on serving young adults, youth, teens, families and children, and we will partner alongside our current partners who are at Head Start and the Judy Center and the 2 schools there to provide very needed services out of this location. We will use it to be able to place staff in there, and we will bring in staff partners to provide services in a community that really has things like transportation barriers and significant needs that we have learned over the pandemic, but really before the pandemic, that we need to bring to this community. And it will allow us to create a welcoming campus with the 50-plus center, Rec and Parks, ourselves, and the library working together to serve families in the community. We will be bringing youth development programming, after school enrichment programming, and we'll provide it as a satellite office to bring in staff from our Office of Children and Families and our local children's board to increase services there and the availability of on-site services to the community. And then the last project that I'm before you with is the Leola Dorsey Day Resource Center. We are requesting support to do improvements at that location. We run a day resource center in partnership with Grassroots. They staff the day resource center for us. And our vision is to be able to go in, do some improvements that will allow us to expand the services that are available to a growing vulnerable population. During the pandemic, at times we were serving 120 individuals a day at the Day Resource Center, calling for various services, food, clothing, medical services, all kinds of needs, qualifying people for resources that we could at least be able to provide for them on site there. And so our hope is to make this a facility that will allow us to bring in more partners, increase the outreach, and increase the capacity for our partners, along with people in our offices, to come on site and meet the needs of a much growing population in the county. So I thank you for your time, and we ask for your support for each of these. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Scott. And next we have Bernard Fordhaus, and we have Brian Moody.
Hi, good evening, members of the delegation. My name is Brian Moody. I'm a county resident and also employee of the Howard County Department of Recreation and Parks. I'm happy to speak to you tonight about 6 bond initiatives, and I will be as fast as I can, that are being presented by Howard County government. And I'm speaking to you, thankfully, through my wife's working Chromebook, so that's why it says Laura. I apologize for that. So the first bond bill that we're proposing and requesting support for is the Bernard Fordhaus. We have been fortunate to receive funding for this project in the past. It is a readaptive reuse of a historic building in Ellicott City. It is off Main Street, but is very characteristic of a middle-class home for a skilled craftsman of the 1800s. Our goal, after acquiring this property that was in disrepair, is to renovate it so that it can be used for educational and recreational programming. It's going to include classrooms. The county actually does not have an ideal site for the preservation of all historic artifacts that have been recovered from Ellicott City, both at our sites and along Main Street. And so that can be developed at this site. And then in addition, it'll provide some potential office space for some of our nonprofit partners that help us on environmental and historical issues. So
Just to be quick and brief, we do hope that you will continue to support us with that. Design is now complete and we're ready to move forward on construction of that project. The next one I have coming up, and a good segue, another historic property, is the historic Blandair Mansion. We've been very fortunate to be approaching the completion of the active development of the south side of the park, south of 175. Great new playground, a lot of great fields, and working on a couple additional amenities before we have to stop. We cannot proceed with development of the north side of the park until a bridge is developed over 175 and you have egress and ingress for the westbound traffic. However, there is a phase H on the north side, which is the historic area of the Blandair farm, the Blandair property. And within that is the Blandair Mansion. That property, that structure is currently secured. However, we've only had funds to do basically the very minimal to preserve the structure at this time. It needs an HVAC system. It needs sprinklers to control the internal environment, prevent it from burning down. And then it ultimately needs public restrooms so we can one day develop it into a destination site for special uses and programming. The north side of Blandair is very unique in that it retains many of the buildings from the 1800s. It includes an old granary. It includes what are believed to be slave quarters, residence for indentured servants and other laborers on the farm. The improvement and development of this historic area gives us the opportunity to tell the whole story of all the people that resided on the property. And it's something that's unique. A lot of farms have since removed some of these buildings. So we do request your support in being able to restore that building as the centerpiece of that effort. The next one is Centennial Park West Area Playground. We were very fortunate that the Maryland General Assembly gave us local parks and playground infrastructure support last year. We thank you for that. And much of that support that Howard County received is being used to redevelop and renovate the Centennial West area. Those renovations are going to include improvements to parking, pathways, and fields that will improve access for all in the Centennial West area. The park was developed over 30 years ago. Portions of it have ADA Band-Aids, but this will really improve access to the lake in all portions of the park. However, that funding is not enough for us to also do the playground, which, as I said, is now 30 years old. The typical warranty on a playground is about 10, safety surfacing 8. So it is in need of a renovation. Some parts we cannot even find anymore. So we do hope you will help us in renovating that playground and keeping up with the rest of the progress in the west area. I have 2 more playgrounds I'll breeze through. One is Rockburn Branch Park. Again, one of our most popular parks. Has all kinds of amenities, has unique stuff such as the mountain bike skills course and the disc golf course. However, it has a single playground that is over 20 years old and is certainly showing its age. Waterloo Park has a playground. This is a neighborhood playground near the intersection of 95 and 175. The Maryland Department of Natural Resources, in cooperation with the University of Maryland, has developed a park equity mapper. I encourage the delegation to, in a search browser, look up the park equity mapper. It identifies parks in need of improvements to provide equitable access to recreational resources. And Waterloo Park is a census tract that scores in high need. This park actually makes up 1/3 of that area and nevertheless has a very poor score. So the playground is over 20 years old. And we would appreciate any support you can provide in helping us make sure that those residents are receiving the best possible resources and amenities. And the final thing I have real quick is West Friendship Park, improvements to an existing building. I'm sorry, I'm almost done. And trails. During COVID, the park system benefited from a lot of use. This park is a great example. A lot of people started using this park for the first time and have since loved it for all kinds of passive use, trails and bikes and dogs and whatnot. But it has shown its wear and we need your support to deal with the overuse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moody. We are now moving on to the Ellicott City Drop Arms project, and we have Michael Henson followed by Deanna Smith.
Hi, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, well, I'm Mike Henson, the Director of the Office of Emergency Management for Howard County, or OEM. OEM supports nomination of the Ellicott City Drop Arm Gates project by the Howard County Delegation. Historic Ellicott City has an extensive history of flash flooding, the most recent of which occurred in July 2016 and May of 2018, and resulted in loss of life and significant infrastructure and property damage. Per the Howard County Police Department's Ellicott City Flood Operations Standard Operating Procedure, 9 police officers are deployed to block main vehicular access points to Main Street when flash flooding is imminent. This removes police officers from their other essential functions and responses to block these vehicular access points. While electronic message boards are stationed at the entrances to historic Ellicott City to alert community members to road closures and flash flooding, past responses have shown that in many cases, people will drive past those message boards and directly into flash flooding waters. In addition, if officers are already responding to emergency calls simultaneous to flash flooding road closure operations, they may not be able to leave their scene to block these access points on Main Street, which could result in serious threat to life safety. As this is a continuing and worsening threat for historic Ellicott City, OEM is proposing a solution to automate some of this response, lessening the reliance on human resources and improving response time. Installing 4 drop arm barriers to restrict vehicular access to critical roadways during flash flood events will eliminate the need to deploy these 9 officers as the drop arm barriers will be remotely activated, and the points where they would be placed would allow for detouring to higher ground. Delegation support for the project will promote public safety and complement the Ball administration's ongoing commitment to the EC Safe and Sound Flood Mitigation Plan. For these reasons, the Office of Emergency Management supports approval of this bond initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henson. Deanna? Deanna Smith. We can't hear you if you're speaking. Okay, we will move on to Ellicott City Wayfinding, but I will announce at this time that if anyone is on the call or in the waiting room and missed your turn when you were called for your bill, we will go back at the end of the hearing and pick up anyone who hasn't had a chance to testify that should have been earlier. Moving on to Ellicott City Wayfinding, we have Brian Schepter.
Good evening, Chairs Watson and Lamb and members of the delegation. My name is Brian Schepter. I serve as Deputy Director for the Department of Planning and Zoning. I'm here to express the department's support for bond bill, historic downtown Ellicott City wayfinding in the amount of $250,000. Many of you may be aware of the Ellicott City Watershed Master Plan, which was adopted last year. The plan provides policies and implementation actions for protecting and enhancing Ellicott City and the surrounding Tiber Branch watershed. The master plan represents the culmination of a multi-year public outreach process and builds upon County Executive Ball's Ellicott City Safe and Sound Flood Mitigation Plan. Among other enhancements, the master plan identified the need for a comprehensive wayfinding system for historic Ellicott City to help visitors find parking and attractions, enhance commercial district branding, and identify high ground in the event of emergency. The requested capital dollars will fund the production, the fabrication and installation of wayfinding signage for the historic downtown area. The types and placement of wayfinding will be further defined through a transportation study to be completed in 2022 in partnership with the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. The Department of Public Works is in the process of selecting on-call consultants with technical capacity to design appropriate wayfinding signage, and DPW has identified funding for sign design purposes. This bond bill request is to provide funding for production and installation, which will bring the project to completion. The realization of this wayfinding system will energize the commercial corridor of Ellicott City and help visitors explore the area's historic sites safely and efficiently. For these reasons, we request your approval of this bond initiative. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you for being with us tonight, Mr. Schepter. And now we're moving on to the last mile fiber and public Wi-Fi. And we will hear from Timothy Mayette.
Hey, good evening. This is TJ Mayette. I'm the Deputy Director of Howard County's Department of Technology, and I'll be speaking in support of the public Wi-Fi project in nomination by the Howard County Delegation. Since the pandemic has forced many services online, demand for public Wi-Fi has continued to increase as residents' expectations and need to connect to Wi-Fi have been transformed. This project will provide free public Wi-Fi in Howard County parks and county facilities, as well as the required middle mile middle mile fiber infrastructure to support this expansion. This project is but part of our effort to bridge the digital divide within Howard County. Our research has found that lack of internet connectivity for Howard County residents is frequently due to socioeconomic factors, and this bond enables our ability to provide internet access at no cost, while also bringing fiber to several county locations that will increase our ability to provide digital-based services in the future. As I mentioned, the Department of Technology has pursued several projects to bridge the digital divide, including partnering with the Howard County Public School System to provide internet access to our students and expand current internet services within the county. Looking forward, we plan to engage with PG&E, local internet service providers, and other stakeholders to continue to expand fiber and free Wi-Fi to other underserved areas. While we're exploring every avenue of funding, I would like to mention that this particular project does not seem to meet the requirements for funding broadband projects under the American Rescue Plan, and this bond will allow the county's ARP funding to be applied to other areas of need. Delegation support for this project will complement Howard County's ongoing commitment to provide services to our residents and bridge the digital divide. For these reasons, the Department of Technology and Communication Services supports approval of this bond initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayette. We are moving on to the Maryland Innovation Center, Larry Tweel.
Here we go.
Mr. Tweel.
Stand by. Okay. Having trouble with the video. There we go. All right. Good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide testimony on this bond initiative. As you know, the Maryland Innovation Center has been a project of the Economic Development Authority for several years now, and we have renovated the first, third, and fifth floors of that building and are providing space for our entrepreneurial programs, and are currently home to over 32 businesses. We're requesting this funding because the building is over 30 years old, and after many years of deferred maintenance, it requires further improvements. The fourth floor, which was originally out of scope for our renovation project, because of the demand for our services and the need for space, we are quickly filling it, but the fourth floor was home to the Howard County Fire and Rescue for over 20 years, and it is well worn and not as conducive to the business support ecosystem that we're striving to turn that building into. So as we are seeking to make that space more welcoming, more innovative with technology, and frankly, deferred maintenance items like proper HVAC and ventilation, the building is just way behind, and our ability to do it as an authority, we're very eager to provide these services, but we want to do it in a clean, comfortable, and collaborative environment. So for that reason, we are requesting this funding. We are seeing an increased demand for our services. We believe a lot of the workers over this past pandemic are seeking to start their own business, and demand for our services and the space to invent and collaborate has increased. So we want to provide a space for those jobs to be created, those companies to be created, and basically create opportunity and wealth in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tweel. We're going to move to Accessible Trail Extension, where Senator Lamb will take over, and the first person, or the only person to testify on that, is Meg Boyd.
Good evening, Meg Boyd, Executive Director of the Howard County Conservancy. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of this Accessible Trails project. This project will allow the Conservancy to complete our most accessible trail, the trail that has access to our restrooms and our handicap parking areas. That the trail is in the John L. Clark Honors Garden, named by Senator James Clark in honor of his brother. The previous funder for this project stopped funding this type of project when we were about halfway down the trail. And for almost 4 years now, we've had an unfinished trail surface in this area. This project is to fund 6,250 feet of trail surface using pervious pavers, which also serve as a demonstration area for rainwater infiltration within our native plant garden. Thank you for your consideration of this project.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Boyd. Next, we will go to the Ellicott City Jail Rehabilitation Bond Initiative, and we have one person signed up to testify. This is Ellie Cowan from Preservation, Maryland.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. My name is Ellie Cowan. I'm the Director of Government Relations for Preservation Maryland, and I'm here tonight to urge your support of the LBI for the rehabilitation of the historic Ellicott City Jail. Preservation Maryland intends to partner with our colleagues in Howard County and state government to plan for and pursue the adaptive reuse of the historic Ellicott City Jail to serve the surrounding community, potentially as a center for climate, heritage, and preservation studies. Preservation Maryland has long been committed to the future of historic Ellicott City. And with the Circuit Court of Howard County vacating its current property in Ellicott City, there is a unique reuse opportunity for the historic property complex where the court is currently located. Indeed, the Ellicott City Watershed Master Plan that was referenced earlier in this hearing specifically calls for the mixed-use redevelopment of the court and its adjacent properties, which includes the jail. So this LBI funding would support that adaptive reuse preservation work. As a Center for Heritage and Climate Studies, along with contemplative public space, a rehabilitated jail would put Howard County at the cutting edge of the conversation about climate change resiliency, historic revitalization, and building reuse. For Maryland, the impact of an increasingly volatile climate and changing weather patterns presents real and dramatic challenges for communities across the state, especially historic resources, which are often located in vulnerable locations. Ellicott, there's no more fitting location than Ellicott City to house efforts related to broader preservation and climate change studies. I've submitted written testimony, and I urge you to support this legislative bond initiative. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we're going to go on to the Legislative Bond Initiative for Howard County Veterans Monument. We have one person testifying. This is Wanda Riddle, representing the Howard County Veterans Foundation. This will be followed by Elizabeth Everhart from Patuxent Commons. Ms. Riddle, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to testify tonight. My name is Wanda Riddle. I'm a captain, United States Navy, retired, and vice president of the Howard County Veterans Foundation. And I'm testifying in support of the legislative bond initiative for the Howard County Veterans Monument. First of all, I wanted to thank the delegation for your continuing strong support of the foundation and for our Howard County veterans in general. Also, for many of you who were able to attend the Veterans Day parade and celebration on the 7th down at the Columbia Lakefront, we thank you very much for being there. It was greatly appreciated. With regard to this legislative bond initiative, if it should be approved, it will move us closer to realizing our vision for the Veterans and Military Families Monument in Millie Bailey Park in downtown Columbia. With over 20,000 veterans in Howard County, there's no permanent monument dedicated to their service. This monument will allow us to properly honor all veterans, past, present, and future, and their families with a compelling and permanent piece of public artwork and public gathering space. It will be a physical and an outright expression of our gratitude for their service and their sacrifices. On behalf of the foundation, I thank you very much for your consideration of this proposed bond bill.
All right, thank you, Ms. Riddle. Next, we'll move on to the Legislative Bond Initiative for Patuxent Commons, and we have Elizabeth Everhart representing Mission First Housing Development Corporation. She'll be followed by Christine Flaker and Tracy Spiegel on deck for Howard County 1-22. Ms. Everhart, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. Good evening. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Everhart, a senior project manager at Mission First Housing, speaking in support of Patuxent Commons. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're thrilled to be selected by the Howard County Autism Society to bring the Patuxent Commons project to reality. The Autism Society developed the project concept after studying various housing models to serve adults with disabilities and decided the best practice was an inclusive intergenerational model. The housing project concept seeks to maximize individual potential and facilitate community integration for people of all ages, abilities, and incomes. The new 76-unit mixed income apartment building will serve adults with disabilities in 25% of the units, as well as seniors and families in a supportive, inclusive community. We have an ideal site for this development under contract, located directly across the street from the Hickory Ridge Village Center in Columbia, with easy access to public transportation, employment opportunities, shopping, and amenities. Financing a project like Patuxent Commons is challenging since 25% of the units will serve residents with incomes at or below 30% of the area median income, who have very limited ability to pay rent. Additionally, the project has been challenged by rising construction prices, which is driving up the cost to build. Additional resources available through the Legislative Bond Initiative will help the project to reach even the lowest income individuals and ensure we can afford to construct this high quality, green, accessible, model inclusive community. We've been greatly encouraged by the county and local community support for Patuxent Commons, especially big thanks to Delegate Feldmark, and appreciate your consideration of continued support for this Legislative Bond Initiative. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're now going to go to our last bill, which is Howard County 1-22, Howard County Board of Education, School Safety Personnel. First, we will be hearing from Christine Flaker, followed by Tracy Spiegel and Bill Holland, who are on deck afterwards. Ms. Flaker, are you there?
Thank you. Yes. My name is Christine Flaker, and I oppose Howard County 122 removing SROs from schools. I'm a parent of a high school student and a middle school student in Howard County schools. Now more than ever, we need SROs in our schools. The reasons you want to remove them are really the same reasons that they should stay. You imply that they're intimidating to minorities. How is removing them going to make the police less intimidating? Instead, I believe it would create more division. According to the Howard County Police Department website, the goal of the SRO program is to build positive relationships with students and staff while providing a safe school environment and deterrence to crime. By removing SROs, we are creating division, yet what we need is unity. What better way to create unity than to integrate law enforcement officers with minorities in a non-threatening environment? In addition to providing safety and security, SROs speak to classes about Maryland law, safe driving practices, and dangers of social media. They participate in many youth programs outside of the schools and attend community events. My dad was a sergeant on the Metropolitan Police Department when community policing was implemented in the 1980s. I compare this program to the SRO program. This initiative put police on the street on foot in the respective districts. My dad befriended the business owners, residents, teens, and children on his patrols. They came to think of him as a friend, came to him with problems, resulting in a significant reduction in crime. The community learned that police are not the enemy, and by working together, they were able to create a safer community. This is how the SRO program is designed to work. If the SROs are allowed to continue doing their jobs, the community as a whole will benefit. With so many people mistrusting police, we really need teens to see that the majority of police have good intentions, are humans, and are there to be a resource and a friend. This, along with the safety of our children, is the primary goal of the SRO program. Please allow SROs to be a continuing presence in our schools. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ms. Flaker. Next we'll have Tracy Spiegel, then Bill Holland, and then Tracy Broning. Ms. Spiegel, go ahead.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yep, go ahead.
My name is Tracy Spiegel. I'm a parent of 2 Howard County Public School System children. I oppose the bill. Both of my children have had wonderful experiences with their SRO, but I realize with tonight's conversation being a white woman with white children that may not mean a lot, because the controversy around the SROs has roots and that they are perceived to be bad for minority children. So I tried to think of a way to make my testimony compelling, and I decided to do research on local experts and research on local data. And fortunately for me, the Baltimore Sun interviewed 3 local people that I thought it would be interesting to quote. I'm going to share their quotes about the program. And because I'm in marketing, I think it's fun to have props. But this is Chief Lisa Myers. She was recently the chief of the Howard County Police Department. Her quote in The Sun is, "I believe it is critical now more than ever to bridge gaps that may exist between police and young people, particularly students of color. Our SROs can help change behaviors that might otherwise lead to involvement in the criminal justice system." The other person that spoke to the Baltimore Sun on this subject was Rich Gibson, and he brought forth data that when a juvenile is reported to the Howard County Police Department, 91% of the time it's a call from the community, not from the school. And he said why the school to prison pipeline has a very real and monstrous impact on some communities, data does not support that in Howard County. And then my last one is Mr. Motley, who is the principal at Atholton, who said, "There are certain marginalized communities that have negative relationships or feelings about law enforcement. What better way to improve that than through this program?" I appreciate your time, and I hope that for Howard County, you listen to your experts in your local data. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Spiegel. We have Bill Holland next, followed by Tracy Broning, and then Karen Grief. Mr. Holland, are you there? Bill Holland, you're up. Are you there? I don't see you in the participant list. If you're there, please speak up. If not, we will move on to Tracy Broning. Go ahead, Ms. Broning.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. I'm testifying against 122, against the proposed removal of SROs in the Howard County schools. I'm a lifelong resident of Howard County, and my daughter is a freshman in high school. Her school recently had the threat of a school shooting, and the administration had to increase the amount of SROs in the school due to that threat. Thankfully, nothing happened. But unfortunately, so far in 2021, there have been 24 school shootings in this country, 6 killed and 34 injured. That really may not sound like a lot to you all, but 1 is too many, and we all know this. Teachers and administration staff should not be held responsible for having to break up fights and thwart school shootings and incidents like this. This is something that's for trained professionals that do this on a daily basis, have been trained their whole career for things like this, not administration staff and not teachers. I've witnessed fights on video from numerous high schools so far in this county where teachers and principals have had to get involved. Don't they have enough to do? Why should they ever have to put themselves in that position? They cannot do this on their own. Unless there is a bona fide 100% plan to address some of these incidents and some of these by the county to step in, we cannot remove and afford to remove the SROs. It is too dangerous for our children and for our staff and the administration. So, like I said, 1 is too many, and we really need to think hard about this. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Ms. Broning. Next, we have Karen Grief, followed by Kim Wells, and then Andrea Chambly. Ms. Grief, are you there? Not seeing you in the participant list. Ms. Grief, if you're there, please speak up. If not, we will move on to Kim Wells, representing the Olney Counseling Center. Ms. Wells, are you there? Ms. Wells, if you're there, please speak up. If not, we'll move on next to Andrea Chambly. She'll be followed by Susan Edwards and then Natasha White. Ms. Chambly, are you there? All right, I'm not seeing you in the participant list either. If you're there, please speak up. If not, we can go on to Miss Susan Edwards.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hey, this is Susan Edwards. I'm speaking in opposition of this bill. I am a Howard County business owner, a parent of 4, and a lifelong resident of Howard County. I am against replacing the SROs. I feel 120% safer knowing a police officer is stationed at my children's school. I have 2 children in high school right now. And they tell me that the SROs allow students to get to know police officers and form valuable relationships with them. They are another resource for students to turn to for guidance and support. And my daughters are huge fans of the Howard County Police Pledge Program that fosters youth leadership in our county. All in all, having these officers in the schools, it promotes safety, but it also promotes relationships, and it gives a face to the police officers in our county. Please do not replace the SROs. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Edwards. Next, we have Natasha White, followed by Angela Freeman, and then Michael Libber. Ms. White, are you there? Natasha White, if you're there, please speak up. I don't see you in the participants list, so we'll move on to Angela Freeman. Ms. Freeman, are
yes.
you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. My name is Angela Freeman. I oppose 1-22. I've been paying close attention to local testimony on the topic of SROs, and I've noticed a theme. In our community, the opposition testimony has been largely subjective. In January 2021, Superintendent Dr. Martirano said, and I quote, "It is essential that we follow a carefully planned process for balanced discussion that is grounded in research and fact, is objective and transparent, and acknowledges and considers all points of view." End quote. In this spirit, I would like to present factual, objective testimony in support of SROs. Fact 1, the SRO program is free. If the SRO program were discontinued, there would be zero cost savings to the county or school system. Instead, new costs would be incurred to, quote, address the need for school security employees and address the need for additional support personnel and mental health. End quote. We already have a dire shortage of support personnel and mental health experts. How could we possibly hire more, much less retain the ones we have, if we have even less money in the budget? At a time when financial barriers impede our ability to retain and hire, removing a free resource hardly seems a fiscally responsible plan. Fact 2, SROs provide essential support to staff. Not only do our school systems rely on in-person support from SROs, they also rely on guidance from the National SRO Program. Removing them would put more stress and responsibility on the already full plates of school system staff. I'd like to close with what I consider to be the most important fact. SROs save lives. Let's remember why we decided to put our SROs in our schools to begin with, to protect our children, the staff, and our community. Because one child lost is too many. One staff member lost is too many. Why wouldn't we apply the same logic we applied to COVID school closures to this issue, especially when we can prevent these losses?
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Next, we will have Michael Libber, followed by Laura without a last name, and then Jonathan Shaw. Mr. Libber, are you there? Michael Libber? All right, I'm not seeing a Michael Libber in the participants list. Mr. Libber, if you're there, please speak up. If not, we'll move on to Laura. Laura's provided a phone number. Last 4 digits are 0442. Laura with phone number 0442. If you're there, please speak up or unmute yourself. I'm not seeing you on the call list nor on the participants list. Laura, are you there? If not, we'll move on to Mr. Jonathan Shaw, followed by Rob Wagoner, followed by Kevin Link. Mr. Shaw, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, fantastic. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay. Hello. My name is Jonathan Shaw. I am the full-time health teacher at Wild Lake High School, as well as the varsity tennis coach. I'm here today to oppose this bill and support keeping SROs in Howard County Public Schools. SROs are a vital part of our school system. And if you're not in the schools personally, then it's very difficult to understand just how important they are. SROs help provide mentorship, help with classwork, give life advice, and help with career opportunities. But most importantly right now, SROs are helping to break the false negative stigma there is about police, that cops are some sort of bad people and that cops are out to get you. SROs send a pro-police message to the kids at a young age and help bridge the gap between police and the community. The students who are lucky enough to know our personal SRO, Officer Cole, they love him. Our SROs are of the utmost importance and need to remain in Howard County. They sacrifice for the students and always go the extra mile for them, which is something we desperately need right now. I'm always hearing from people in power in our community something on the lines of, quote, like, the most important thing to us is the safety and well-being of our students. Yet, you want to take away the one person most likely to prevent tragedy in a potential life and death situation. It just doesn't make any sense. It just does not pass the common sense test to me. I want you to know that Officer Cole and the other SROs are beloved members of our school and our communities. Mr. Cole is a personal friend, a valued member of our family at Wild Lake, a hero, and most importantly, a great man and a great role model for the students. And our family at Wild Lake is a better place for having him there. I encourage community members and voters to support keeping SROs in Howard County Public School System. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shaw.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Rob Wagner, followed by Kevin Link, and then Christine Dustin. Mr. Wagner, are you here with us? It looks like you're in the participant list.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Rob Wagner, a longtime resident of Ellicott City with a son in 11th grade, Howard County Public School System, and I oppose Bill 122 to remove SROs from the schools. The goals of the SRO program are to build positive relationships while providing a safe school environment for students and staff while deterring crime. All are well-trained and effective at bridging gaps between youth and law enforcement. They help at-risk youth change behaviors that may otherwise lead to involvement with the criminal justice system. In April of this year, Calvin Ball held a press conference on his proposed SRO policy changes. And Mr. Ball cited national data, not necessarily local, that supported the debate that SROs exasperated the school to prison pipeline, and that school discipline systematically and disproportionately impacts students of color and with disabilities, causing their reevaluation of the use of the SROs. Despite these facts, Mr. Ball still did not recommend removing all the SROs. He had a more moderate approach to that. At that same venue, the state's attorney, Rich Gibson, spoke, and his key points were, he took office in 2019. His primary goals was to look into the existence of a school to prison pipeline in Howard County and dismantle it if it was impacting justice. He said that a juvenile was more likely to enter the criminal justice system for robbing someone on a Columbia bike path than being charged for an interaction that occurred on school grounds. There was no recent evidence to support the school to prison pipeline existent in our community. In final thoughts, SRO complaints filed against the SROs, statistics show that there were 0 complaints in 2018, only 2 in 2019 that were not substantiated, and there were 0 complaints in 2020. The SROs are here to help the students and staff. Please keep the SROs in the schools. It's abundantly clear, and keep them there for our students and the staff. Thank you.
Mr. Wagner, I'll turn it over to Chairperson Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Kevin Link.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Kevin Link. I will be testifying on one bill. I'm a business owner in Howard County, and I have 2 children in the public school system. I oppose the legislation to remove SROs from our schools. Police officers are heroes, and having additional heroes inside of our schools, along with our hero teachers, is a good thing, not a bad thing. It's common knowledge that the presence of a police officer can deter poor behavior. If you remove SROs from schools, that deterrent is gone, and it can put teachers in the impossible position of dealing with criminal or violent behavior. If SROs are removed and a situation occurs at the school that requires the training of a police officer, they will still be called, but now the school has to wait for help. Time matters, and let's be clear, teachers and staff are not trained to do what police officers do. While shootings might be rare, fights are not. A Wild Lake High School teacher died several years ago after breaking up a fight at school. In the absence of an SRO, an offending student is likely to be dealing with whatever officer responds to the school by the administration's request, instead of the SRO, who likely knows the student, family, and personal circumstances. An SRO in the school can respond to a criminal or violent situation quickly and has a much better chance of diffusing the situation. Now, SROs do more than patrol the school. They make great relationships with the students, act as positive role models, and in the process, improve their community relationships. The school should get their SROs involved in more activities with the students to build trust and respect for law enforcement officers. If a child has a fear of police, are we going to let them spend their whole life with that fear? Or are we going to give them an opportunity to change that? Keep SROs in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Link. Appreciate your testimony. Christine Dustin, followed by Thomas Kasuba.
Hi, good evening. My name is Christine Dustin, and I'm against removing SROs from schools. I'm against this bill because I don't believe the facts support completely scrapping the SRO program in Howard County. There are a number of studies that show that the presence of SROs in schools does not create the so-called school-to-prison pipeline. The SRO program in Howard County has been successful, and we can use the presence of these resource officers for positive outcomes in schools. In the SRO Committee Fall Report in 2020, Willie Flowers, the head of the NAACP Maryland State Conference, supported the SRO program in Howard County, stating that he feels that the SRO program aligns with NAACP goals in Howard County, and that HCPD is very open to community police relations. HCPSS, as was mentioned earlier, doesn't pay for SROs. Ms. Atterbury's bill calls for additional support, security, and mental health staffing, which would cost HCPSS more money. We can't even guarantee full staffing of teachers right now, let alone more support staff. I want to acknowledge that it is critical to hear and validate the concerns of individuals and communities regarding SROs in schools. The experiences of persons of color and persons with differing abilities absolutely matters. But the argument that some students don't feel safe with SROs in schools is not an objective, fact-based argument. I truly believe that conversations with all of the communities represented in HCPSS can strengthen the SRO program rather than necessitate its termination. We should be looking for ways to increase positive interactions between police and the communities they serve. I'll close with news from Alexandria City this week. In May of this year, the Alexandria City Council voted to completely remove SROs from Alexandria schools. This week, they voted to temporarily reinstate SROs because of increased violence in several schools. Don't let Howard County follow that example. Keep SROs in schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thomas Kasuba.
Hi, my name is Thomas Kashuba, and I live in Ellicott City. I guess everybody's forgotten about the Mount Hebron High School in Ellicott City. Was a target of a terrorist martyrdom operation. Yeah, that's my kid's school. The terrorist in this story was Mohammed Khalid, who was a student at one time at Mount Hebron High School. And in 2012, he pled guilty to conspiracy to conduct a terrorist operation. One of those operations was going to be a Columbine-like attack at Mount Hebron High School in Ellicott City. But it gets a little bit worse. He had particularly targeted children of intelligence agency parents and parents that worked at the FBI. I could stick this camera outside this window right here, and I could point it at the house that was raided by the FBI related to this incident. But don't just believe me. Go ahead and Google it. Google FBI Jihad Jane, Mount Hebron. And you can start reading about the sort of details of this incident that was narrowly avoided. Now, we worried about this back in 2012. I guess we've forgotten about that just 9 years later. To give you a point of comparison, Mount Hebron High School has about 1,600 students. Back in the 80s, my parents used to run charity dances in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Now, the city of Scranton mandated that they had to have a police officer. They also had to have a fireman. Now, these were charity dances, not exactly a rowdy crowd of less than 400 people, and a police officer was required to be there. I think our children in our high schools in Howard County deserve at least that level of protection, if not more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kasuba. Is David Cheplack with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for giving me the chance to share my opinion and experience. My name is David Cheplack, and I oppose the bill to remove SROs from schools. I'm the father of two daughters who are currently in 3rd and 5th grade in Elkridge. I'm also a federal agent for one of the 3-letter agencies that fall under the U.S. Department of Justice. Specifically, I work with the U.S. Attorney's Office and officers from Baltimore City PD, Baltimore County PD, and the Howard County PD to focus on solving violent crimes involving firearms, to include homicides, non-fatal shootings, carjackings, and commercial armed robberies. For the past 15 years, I've personally investigated dozens of crimes in which juveniles were found to have committed carjackings and armed robberies, many of which resulted in the innocent victims being shot and killed. As we speak, I'm currently working a case in which a 16-year-old who's part of a robbery crew was responsible for at least 3 murders, multiple non-fatal shootings, and a dozen carjackings and commercial armed robberies in Baltimore County and in the city. From a law enforcement perspective, the intel that SROs provide to criminal investigators related to juvenile offenders is essential, and their removal from schools would result in a significant lapse in our ability to identify and locate our suspects who are juveniles. Information gleaned from an SRO report has been instrumental in the investigation that I'm currently working. Obviously, most students don't fall into the category of sociopathic behavior, and therefore the SRO's most important role is to serve as the protectors of our children while they're in school. The reality that we live in is that there are students in our schools who will not hesitate to use violence against each other or staff members, and school administrators cannot, nor should they, be expected to intervene in these types of situations. Whether it's through de-escalation techniques or the use of appropriate control and restraint tactics to intervene during acts of violence, I believe that SROs provide an essential resource to our students and school staff that cannot be fulfilled by untrained or non-sworn personnel. Lastly, and most importantly, I believe that the ability of the SROs that have to create positive relationships with the students that they serve is invaluable. A dedicated SRO has the ability to be instrumental in establishing positive interactions between students and law enforcement officers, so students see police officers as more than just a badge and a uniform. As a Leo and a father, I oppose the bill to remove SROs from schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cheplack. Do we have Kathy Dates or Dats here with us from Lisbon Elementary School? Kathy from Lisbon. Okay, how about Justin Nally from the ACLU?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, delegation chairs, Howard County delegation. My name is Justin Nally. I'm the policy analyst at the ACLU of Maryland. The ACLU of Maryland supports Howard County legislation 10-1, and thank you to Delegate Atterbury for introducing this important bill. We have all had to deal with the strain of this pandemic, isolated from family and friends, going on almost 2 years. It's been hard on adults. Imagine this experience through the eyes of a child. During this time, we have also witnessed and reckoned with police killings of unarmed Black men and women. Now, it seems like some of the opposition tonight have not had to deal with that reckoning. It's important that we provide our children in Howard County and across the state the support needed to deal with this trauma while limiting unnecessary police interactions. Now, I hear a lot this evening about the positivity of school resource officers and bridging those connections and gaps with students, but the data does not support that fact. in Howard County, exactly, there are 64% of students that make up arrests are Black, but Howard County only has 1 out of 4 students in the county that are Black. 86% students of color make up those arrested in Howard County School District. And 10% of the Howard County population have students with disabilities, but they make up 21% of those arrested in schools. Now, I'm wondering, where is this gap between those students and the school resource officers? Now, we have opportunity, if we look to Montgomery County, who have eliminated SROs from their schools, as a example of how this can look during the Howard County school system. I just want to lastly say it is difficult to hear and disheartening when Howard County, such a diverse county, exacerbates these disparities for Black students in Howard County because of school resource officers and those who are targeted. So the ACLU supports this legislation. We urge a favorable report for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nally. We have Erica Shamaria next.
Good evening. I'm Erica Chavarria, a veteran teacher of 12 years, speaking in support of Local Bill 122. I want to first mention that the students at Wild Lake last year, that the previous speaker, Mr. Shaw, teaches at, organized a walkout last year in support of removing police from school because of their actual, not perceived experience with police. Now more than ever, we need to remove police from schools. As an educator, I have never seen the level of needs that exist right now for our students. After almost 2 years of not being in person, our students are dealing with extreme trauma, immense emotions, no time to truly heal or focus on mental health. Now more than ever, our students need access to resources. They need resources dedicated to restorative justice implementation. What they do not need is to be criminalized or arrested for poor choices, age-appropriate behaviors, or mistakes that they make. They do not need an extra layer of trauma with police presence in their schools. As a teacher, I have witnessed the harm inflicted upon students by SROs many times. And this is not about individual officers like the SRO, Wild Lake, with whom I actually have a positive relationship with. It is about the system. The primary job of an SRO is to enforce the law, period. Even if an SRO has formed positive relationships with students, at the end of the day, a cop is a cop. They must and will enforce the law, even with a student who they have built a relationship with. And we know that this primarily affects Black, Indigenous, and students of color. Parents who want their children to have police officers as mentors certainly can find those types of programs in the community. Schools are not the place to address the historically harmful relationship between the police and Black and Brown communities. I encourage this delegation to listen to and honor the voices most impacted by harmful policies and do right by them. We do not need police with guns and the obligation to use their arresting powers and enforcement of the law. You have the opportunity to show through action that you value the voices and lives of Black and Brown students whose lived experiences with police is that of harm and not safety. The passage of this bill is a perfect opportunity for Howard County to be a leader in our state on true educational equity, and I urge a favorable vote for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have Daniel Becker next. How about Todd Steinberg? How about Monisha Sherayil?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Monisha Chirayal. I'm an attorney with the Public Justice Center, where I represent students in special education and discipline proceedings around the state, including in Howard County. And I'm here to testify in strong support of Bill 122. I want to briefly start with an explanation of what this bill does and does not do. It does require districts to, or rather Howard County Public Schools, to develop with input from parents, staff, and students plans for adequate law enforcement coverage for each schools. So schools would have a mechanism in place for calling the police in a true emergency, and Howard County Police would have school coverage officers trained to work with youth who would respond to those calls. It does not eliminate school security incident assistance. It does not prevent police from developing relationships with young people in the context of police athletic leagues, community events, summer camps, from being invited to speak with students. It does lay the groundwork for implementing student mental health services, restorative justice, social emotional learning, all of which have been proven to actually make schools safer by addressing the root causes of student misbehavior. And it does establish that sworn armed police officers will not be on site at Howard County schools every day as they are now in our high schools. And here's the reason for that last piece. We know from overwhelming, uncontroverted research and data, facts, which I am happy to share with the delegation, that police presence in schools does not deter or reduce school shootings or fights or otherwise make schools safer. In fact, a study published in JAMA earlier this year found that SRO presence was associated with an increase in the number of fatalities when a school shooting does occur. The data also shows that police presence funnels kids into the criminal system when they make childhood mistakes in school. And even beyond the numbers, which show that kids in Howard County are getting arrested by school police, mostly for run-of-the-mill fights and disruption, there's the tangible harm that many kids suffer when they find themselves under constant surveillance from armed officers in the space where they're supposed to be learning. There's a Howard, well, let me wrap there. I have an anecdote from a student that I'd love to share with you along with the data, but I will do so in written testimony.
We'll be happy to, we'll be happy to read the written testimony. Thank you so much for your time, for being here tonight. Sarah Fishkind.
Yes, hello. Good evening. My name is Sarah Fishkind, and I'm a graduate of Atholton High School. I am here testifying in support of Delegate Atterbury's legislation to remove SROs from all Howard County public schools. The bulk of my organizing began with March for Our Lives, a gun violence prevention organization. I started that work because I grew up watching school shootings and mass shootings take the headlines of our news. I also know that SROs are not the ones that will prevent school shootings, and I additionally thank Delegate Atterbury for her work in preventing gun violence. In regards to police-free schools, we are not using a national movement to fit our agenda. Howard County is not a bubble exempt from racism and police violence, as many try to claim. We should really be talking about the previous SRO from Mount Hebron who made a Facebook post with a lot of inappropriate and racist terminology that I will not repeat here. I'm gonna skip that. These aren't just a couple of bad apples. I want to make it clear that this is a system of policing, the system that said, quote, the law enforcement role will dominate the work SROs perform in schools, end quote. On my Instagram, I asked my followers to tell me some of the experiences they had with SROs at their schools, and I wanted to share some responses. I am redacting their names to protect their privacy and got permission to share. A student from River Hill said, quote, the newer SRO was hostile towards all the students. Everyone was scared. I remember that he would pull kids out of the lunchroom for no reason to talk to them. I'm not sure what he would say to each of them, but everyone always thought he was being hostile just from his body language and how he was talking to the students. I never felt safe because of him being there. I always felt more scared or on edge, end quote. Another student said, quote, he was very creepy, always talking / what I would consider flirting with the girls, end quote. Another student stated, at my middle school, she would literally walk around and show people her gun. When the Howard County Board of Education chose solely to remove SROs from our middle schools, they proved our point. They proved that they understand that SROs are harming our students, but they are too complacent, corrupt, and lack the courage to actually care. If you vote no on this piece of legislation, you are proving that you care about protecting the privilege of some students rather than addressing the harm and pain of others. Please vote to remove SROs from all schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And next we have Oliver Song.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, Howard County Delegation. My name is Oliver Song, and I am not a parent of any Howard County children because I actually am a student. I am a junior at Wild Lake High School, the same community that several testifiers here are a part of, and I will be speaking in support of the School Resource Officers Act of 2022. I attend one of the most diverse schools in Howard County where we have a school resource officer who is a person of color. Many people at our school like our SRO because he is approachable, friendly, and relatable. He takes on a role of a mentor, an educator, and sometimes a counselor. That is all because he is human. But we need to be able to differentiate the person from the role that they take on. Our SRO is a wonderful person. His job, not quite so. Police officers take on roles that require them to be the brutal, unforgiving wielders of the law. They take on roles that require them to do things to people that even they may not want to do. How can we tell our students that our SRO, a loving and caring person who is forming these bridges between law enforcement and students, that when the time comes, they have to do what is required of them? How can we tell our students that our SRO, a genuine and passionate person who knows many students by name, that when the time comes, they will not hesitate to punish us even for the simplest of mistakes? How can we feel safe when the SRO is the potential threat within our school every single day? How can we feel safe when the person who is supposed to be protecting us fails to achieve that? How can we feel safe when there's the constant funneling of students into the school to prison pipeline despite what people believe, which fuels the division that so many people preach to remove? As much as our fellow community members agree that SROs foster community and make the schools safer, we have to remember that SROs are a double-edged sword. By removing the SRO from school grounds, we are telling our students that we care about their well-being. By removing the SRO from school grounds, we are telling our students that our SRO matters, that the person they are is genuine, that they truly do want what is best for us. Finally, by removing our SRO from the school grounds, we are telling our students that our SROs, even if they are not in our schools, they as people are still very much so a part of our community. Hence, I support this bill because I actually read it, and it is evidently obvious that some of the testifiers today have never been in a Howard County school. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Next, we have Artie Sidhu from Disability Rights Maryland and Maryland Coalition to Reform Discipline.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to testify tonight. My name is Artie Sidhu, and I'm an attorney at Disability Rights Maryland, as well as a co-chair of the Maryland Coalition to Reform School Discipline. I'm here as a parent, as well as a resident of Howard County. I'm here to testify in strong support of Delegate Atterbury's bill to remove school police from Howard County Public Schools. School police disproportionately harms and impacts Black students and students with disabilities. I won't read the stats again, as we have heard them from my colleague at the ACLU of Maryland, but Black students and students with disabilities are both disproportionately impacted by school policing. The disparate impact plays out statewide and nationally, and school-related arrests are even more disproportionate for students with disabilities who are also students of colors. According to national data, Black students with disabilities experience school-related arrests at 6 times the rate of white students without disabilities. As an attorney who provides representation to students with disabilities in education and discipline matters in Howard County specifically and across the state, I have seen firsthand the traumatic and harmful interactions that school police have with students. School police criminalize typical adolescent behavior and disability-related behavior. School police are often involved in restraint and seclusion cases that harm students with disabilities, and they have been improperly called to respond to students with disabilities who engage in non-traditional but non-violent behavior, with the result that the student is handcuffed and charged with disorderly conduct. The student is left traumatized from restraint and handcuffing and criminalized for their disability-related behavior. Not only is policing in schools harmful to our most marginalized students, but at the end of the day, it does not keep our students safe. We've talked a lot about facts and objective research, but we haven't heard a lot tonight. Extensive research across the country has repetitively shown police presence in schools does not prevent school shootings, fights, or any other type of violent behavior. Instead, Howard County should embrace restorative and trauma-informed relationship building and mental health supports to address holistic needs of our students. Therefore, I urge support of this bill, and I also thank the students tonight that have come out and shared their voice. It's extremely powerful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Meredith Curtis Good, followed by Jessica Nichols.
Hi, thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you tonight. I live in District 12. I'm a graduate of Oakland Mills High School and a parent of a middle schooler in Howard County. I strongly support removing police officers from our schools. I care deeply about school safety for my child and for all students. They all need to be supported when they are struggling with their behavior so that they can get on a better path. Mistakes they make as children in schools should not cause them to be criminalized. Implicit bias against Black children is real. I have seen it in action in situations in my child's school. I have seen Black children get a more harsh response from people in authority than white children who do similar things. Implicit bias is not about intentional racism, and it affects all of us in different ways. There is a dangerous narrative in our society that too often causes people to be more suspicious of the actions of Black children, to see them as older than they are, and then to punish them more harshly for their mistakes. And I think that we need to be honest about those dynamics and how they play out in our schools. It is dangerous and unfair to criminalize Black children for actions that are often tolerated from white children. Of course, we must address disruptive and abusive behavior, but thankfully we have more positive restorative approaches we can use, and they work. That is how I want my child to be treated if they are struggling and acting out. And that's why I encourage you to vote yes on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Good. Jessica Nichols?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi, my name is Jessica Nichols. I am a homeowner, a parent, and a current teacher from District 13 here in Howard County. I've been a teacher in Howard County for now 9 years. I spent 5 wonderful years at Wild Lake High School, and I'm current teacher at River Hill High School in Clarksville, Maryland. And I'm here in my personal capacity to strongly support this Howard County Bill 122. Now, we know there's been enough research. It's spanned years and years, and the findings are simple. School resource officers disproportionately arrest students of color and students with disability. We know that students commit disciplinary infractions at the same rate, regardless of their race, ethnicity, country of origin. However, we have a problem with this particular program because this program disproportionately punishes Black, Brown, and students with disabilities for the behaviors that every student commits. And so the problem is this program. Now, many people who testified before me said that, you know, their personal relationships with SROs are evidence that SROs need to stay in school. Now, I myself have a great relationship with my school's SRO, but the problem is the program, not individual officers. In the founding MOU with the school system, the original language called for the SRO to enforce the law. That was the mandate, not build relationships, not help students, but enforce the law. And so this mandate has been leveled at our most vulnerable populations, and it's caused harm to the relationships between police and students. Luckily for us, Howard County recently showed us that we can keep students safe while not having the forced presence of police officers in school. Prior to the county executive's recent order, we had 2 separate and unequal systems of officers in schools in Howard County. The system entailed one where predominantly white middle schools refused to have officers patrol their schools, while predominantly Black and brown schools had daily police presence. The predominantly white middle schools had the adequate coverage plan.
Could you please, I'm sorry, could you please wrap up?
I am wrapping it up. This model showed that you can have schools in Howard County without mandatory police presence and still maintain safety.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Nichols. Drew Vac-Marani, followed by Shelley Brown.
They had actually sent me a message, Drew Vac did, that they would not be able to make it tonight, but I believe they wanted to be recorded as supporting.
Okay, Shelley Brown, please. Lindsay Sands. Rob.
Oh, I'm here.
Lindsay,
Sorry.
great, thank you. Go ahead.
Hi. Okay, so my name is Lindsay Sands. I go to Wild Lake. I'm a junior, and I speak today in support of the School Resource Officers Act of 2022. So nowadays, with COVID-19 pandemic winding down in our small corner of the world, many people talk about a return to normalcy. But as many of you know, the pandemic revealed many truths and highlighted old ones about the way our society operates. The goal of our continued actions should not be a return to normalcy, as what was normal most definitely was not perfect. And in terms of a return to normalcy, if you ask most people, they'd say we need SROs in high schools to break up fights and to keep us safe from outside threats. But I don't have time to talk about the statistics of it, but you heard from other people that's not really true. And you can look up the facts yourself if you're so concerned about that. But what I want to talk about is how I go to Wild Lake. And even though we're known as Reputation, if you haven't gone there, you really don't know what it's about. Because when Glenell came to our school, and Oliver and I were in the marching band, and they threw stuff at us and yelled at us. They were just taking what they think they know from about our school from the outside. So this year, actually, there haven't been as many fights, has been implementing actual restorative justice practices like the peace room and the green and gold rooms, which and most importantly, advisory to our schedule that fosters actual school relationships to kids so that they have relationships with adults in our school that are actually supposed to be there. We don't need police officers to have good relationships with school. You should want your kids to have a good relationship with their teachers. So that's why advisory and things like that have been created. So if you want a good example of what school can be like, you should look to Wild Lake.
Thank you.
So let's move away from policing students and towards nurturing. That can be our new normal.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sands. Thank you for being here tonight. And we have Rob Rhodes next. And after Rob Rhodes, if anyone is in the waiting room or online who we missed, we will hear from you next.
Hi, I'll keep this brief. I'm against the removal of SROs. I believe that there are increased feelings of safety among students, teachers, and administrations with them being present. I believe they deter aggressive behavior and empower staff to maintain order and address behavioral issues in a timely fashion. I also believe they diminish classroom time spent on discipline and behavioral disruptions. I also believe they improve school safety and reduce school-based crime. And I also believe they increase the likelihood that students reporting witnessing a crime and help reduce community-wide criminality. And they improve relationships between law enforcement and youth. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. I'm going to ask our administrator if we have anyone else we need to hear from tonight.
I believe Linda Leslie and Karina Fisher.
Linda Leslie.
In the meeting right now.
Linda Leslie, you may proceed.
I am here. Can you hear me? If
Yes.
It's all right, Delegate Watson, I'm going to deliver my earlier Housing Trust Fund.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank
My
you.
name is Linda Leslie, and I apologize for my earlier MIA status. I'm appearing tonight to express my support of Local Bill 122. My children attended Howard County Public Schools, and I served on the PTSA board of Wild Lake High School for 7 years. In addition, I have personal experience with SRO interactions with a special education child, my child. So I have a fair amount of direct experience with school resource officers. And let me say that I will also concur with Mr. Shaw, who testified earlier on one point. Officer Cole at Wild Lake High School is a wonderful officer and a great human being. But one great officer or even 12 great officers is not what we need to focus on for this conversation. We need to focus on the program. I've listened to the debate in Howard County about SROs for years. I appreciate the concern that some parents have about removing SROs from schools. And while I appreciate the updates recently taken by the county to modify how SROs function, I do not think these changes go far enough. Last year, I heard parents plaintively explain that their children are afraid to attend school if a police officer is not in the building. But what about the many children who are afraid to be in school because a police officer is in the building? We have a mountain of data showing that the presence of officers in schools has negative impacts for children of color and special needs students. We need to listen to that data. This bill strikes an appropriate balance between those asking for the continued presence of armed police officers and those wanting further changes to the SRO program. So I would encourage you to prioritize the safety and comfort of all of our students by voting to pass this bill. I'd also like to take a moment to voice my support for the Housing Opportunities Trust Fund, Hoco 522. Over 30 years ago, as a single young person living in Washington, D.C., I was the recipient of a low-interest loan that allowed me to be able to afford my first home. It wasn't much, but it allowed me to stay in a community I loved. That loan, offered by the DC version of the Housing Opportunities Trust Fund covered by this legislation, made a critical difference for me and has touched thousands of other families over the years. The Housing Opportunities Trust Fund offers us an opportunity to address the critical needs for affordable housing in our community. If 28-year-old me was living here in Howard County today, there is no way I would be able to afford to live on my own. Indeed, as I look around my neighborhood, I see young working people who continue to live with their families because they can't find a place that they can afford. And of course, that doesn't count all the people who commute to Howard County every day for work because they can't afford to live here. Some people don't support this legislation because of perceived benefits for private companies. They think government should build affordable housing. Unfortunately, and this may be a shock, Howard County does not have a bunch of money to build a lot of affordable housing. What we do have is the ability to use the Housing Opportunities Trust Fund to foster affordable housing opportunities, making the most of the money we have. To me, this is an opportunity for all of us, and I encourage you to support Hoco 522. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Leslie. And do we have Karina Fisher with us still?
Yes, I am here.
You may proceed.
Thank you. And thank you for extending a little bit of time. I apologize for missing the chance earlier. This evening, I am reading testimony on behalf of the Howard County Sierra Club in opposition to Bill 1222, which is the disposable bags exemption. In the history of bag legislation in the state of Maryland, this exemption has been considered and then not implemented. Montgomery County, Baltimore City, and Howard County do not have these exemptions. And when the state bill was under consideration with a 10-cent price for paper, an exemption was briefly considered and then removed from the legislation. There are many reasons why this exemption works against the environment and the community that this bill is intended to help. During the General Assembly hearing for the statewide bag bill, when someone proposed an exemption for SNAP and WIC recipients, Delegate Regina Boyce said, "It is extremely extreme to say that people in poverty cannot participate in an environmental process." Ultimately, this amendment was not added to the bill. Here in Howard County, Councilmember Dr. Opal Jones described CB 64 2019, which is the plastic bag fee legislation, as focusing on three main areas. One, to curtail behavior and practices. Two, to provide environmental education programming for public schools. And three, water pollution education and stream cleanups. Dr. Jones further explained that these funds would be used to, quote, further educate the public in the benefits and methods of reducing single-use plastic. The Howard County Sierra Club agrees with Dr. Jones that environmental education is the key in making any type of sustainable progress towards the elimination of plastic bag use. If the exemption was to be implemented, generations of children would learn by example that plastic bags are a benign product. And I will end the testimony short.
Karina, if you sent that in, we will be sure to read the rest of it. Thank you for waiting until the very end. I believe that we've heard from everyone. I would like to make sure that we thank our Howard County Delegation Administrator, Abby Rubling, who's like the Wizard of Oz. She's behind the technology. It's very complicated to put one of these meetings on and make sure everyone gets heard and organize it all. So we thank Abby. We couldn't do it without her. Next steps for the Howard County Delegation are that we will be meeting on a regular basis starting in January. Most likely, the first meeting will be January 26th, but stay tuned on that. And we will meet every Wednesday morning and review these bills and decide how we move forward on them. In the meantime, feel free to contact any one of us between now and when the session starts, or even after session, if you have comments about individual bills. So thank my fellow members and my co-chair for being here tonight, and all of you who have joined us at this late hour. Thank you, and have a happy Thanksgiving.